Is anyone gonna clap? Anyone? I mean, I'm a Nintendo guy. I think it's pretty cool. Anyone? Anyone? Alright, there we go. There we go. Meanwhile, at Nintendo...
Well, the wait is over. This is the Nintendo DS.
Yeah, can you tell which press conference was savvy enough to allow fans of the company from the general public to attend their press conference alongside the journalists and mainstream media? Now, this is 2023 as I'm filming this, late 2023, September 2023, in the last quarter of the year, and it is only a few months away in January of 2004. In January 2024 will be the 20th anniversary of the announcement of the Nintendo DS. And I think it is a unique opportunity, something I've wanted to do for many years, is to really go in depth into the history of the reveal of the Nintendo DS, how it was perceived by the media, how it was perceived by members of the public in terms of, the online gaming community, how I perceived in terms of the people I knew, in school and in my, personal life, being a teen at the time, and how it was, how it really was. It's so easy to take for granted that the DS was going to be a success, but there was severe doubt. I mean, you were, for a long time, even after the DS came out and it was doing well, you were arguing against common sense in the eyes of many people in the gaming community to say that the DS had a long lifespan ahead of it and that it had any business being successful in the same world where the PSP was on the market. So this is my chance to go into this and talk about the PSP, the DS, my experience with both systems, so just the history and my own experience in relation to that history. So let's dig into it. So to set the stage here, Game Boy Advance, GameCube announced side by side at Nintendo's Japanese Space World, sort of trade show in Japan in 2000. And Game Boy Advance and GameCube, in terms of the physical designs of the systems, they were both had this very toy-like design for both units. This synergy that sort of coalesced between them, where they were clear from the beginning that Game Boy Advance and GameCube are twins, whereas before Nintendo's handhelds consoles were kind of doing their own thing. They sort of crossed with N64 with like the transfer pack, and with arguably with the Super Game Boy and Super Nintendo. But here, Game Boy Advance made from the beginning to work with each other, to be stronger as a pair, enhanced the proposition for both systems to sell strong and to have enhanced dual screen gameplay, both single and multiplayer. Game Boy Advance ultimately a souped up Super Nintendo, able to do things better than without things that the Super Nintendo needed extra chips in the cartridge to do, like the Super FX chip. Game Boy Advance was able to do on its own. A lot of the best-selling games, like this year, Link to the Past, was a Game Boy Advance port. It was able to do 4-player gaming with, and as you can see here with Four Swords, which is included with the Game Boy Advance port of Link to the Past, a bit more sophisticated graphics, a little more detailed animation, playing into the Wind Waker art style a bit. So then in 2003, Sony reveals or announces, they don't reveal yet, they announce the PlayStation Portable, the PSP, that it's going to use optical discs, and that this thing is going to be, they kind of said, hey, this is going to be a similar experience to what we're offering with PlayStation 2. And this is in an age when 3D on handhelds is effectively unheard of. And when I'm going to show you a little clip from X-Play when they covered Sony's keynote at Game Developer Conference 2005. So this is we're jumping a couple of years into the future here, for 2003 to 2005. And I'll play this clip from Ken Kutaragi. No, not Ken Kutaragi. It's from Kaz Hirai at Game Developer Conference 2005 when he's discussing about the PSP and its what they view it as its place in the market.
And Sony wasn't afraid of taking a few shots at Nintendo either. PSP will elevate portable entertainment out of the handheld gaming ghetto, and Sony is the only company that can do it.
Handheld ghetto?
Yeah, so that's, I saw that quote floating around for years, that PSP will elevate portable gaming from the handheld gaming ghetto, and I thought it was something some fanboy said. I didn't realize until doing research for this very presentation that I'm doing that was a quote from Kaz Hirai of PlayStation itself. And to call Nintendo's 15-ish years at that point of success with portable gaming with Game Boy as a ghetto is just, I mean, we won't even get into the political correctness of that, but just complete disrespect for Nintendo's success to that point in the handheld gaming market. From Sony's point of view, going into the launch of the PSP against, Nintendo, Game Boy Advance and DS, they're effectively saying Nintendo's success is in the handheld gaming space is undeserved. They're holding portable gaming back. They're dragging it into a slum, into a ghetto, and PSP is going to elevate handheld gaming from that. So that's Sony's perspective going into this. Now, not at E3 2003 when the PSP itself was announced, but at some point after, we got our first footage of Death Jr., which is a game I ended up getting for PSP, though I was Team DS in terms of rooting for DS in terms of actually holding its ground and not being totally crushed by PSP. I was a supporter of portable gaming in general. I really wanted portable gaming to be taken more seriously, by my friends, my gaming friends, my non-gaming kids I knew at school, at high school, that were sort of naysayers of portable gaming, and it was just Nintendo, saying like, oh, the graphics suck, it's not that serious, it's just a kid's toy. And for what PSP was doing, was really actually very exciting to me. This is not the first footage of Death Jr. that came out. It was something similar to this, but when the Death Jr. was the first PSP game that we actually saw footage of, and to see fully, there was at one point something called the Blue Roses engine for the Game Boy Advance, where they were doing this like sort of about halfway as good as PlayStation 1 quality 3D, and for a handheld at the time, that was absolutely incredible. Now, then sometime after that, this concept image of what the PSP and its optical media was going to look like leaked. It looks like the D-pad and the face buttons on this are actually sort of solid state, and then eventually they went with proper physical buttons, and they added an analog stick, which is not on this version. But this, I remember staring for hours at this image, came out alongside a concept image of some models walking around with PSPs. And Sony's approach going into PSP is they see the future of portable electronics. They see the convergence coming. Right now, you have PDAs are still a thing, something akin to like the Pilot series by Palm. You have Blackberries. You have early smartphones, which are really kind of PDA type things with a telephone keypad and extending antenna. The idea of a smartphone or a tablet in the terms of iOS devices or Android is still years in the future. But we have iPods and other MP3 players. We have we have cellular telephones. If you were really cool, you had a flip phone, which was the new hotness at that point. And Sony sees all these devices becoming one thing, and they want to make PSP, in their words, the Walkman of the 21st century. And to be playing movies and music and your gaming, console quality gaming on a handheld, something that arguably did not really fully thrive until the Nintendo Switch. And so, but the aftermath of this is, there's this lingering sense that once this thing hits the market, it's going to wipe Game Boy Advance off the market. The PSP is going to crush Nintendo, and at this point, the Game Boy Advance is carrying Nintendo. They're struggling with the GameCube. I remember around the time Metroid Prime came out, and I was well established in high school when by the time GameCube launched, but I remember friends, people, not even friends, just people I knew in high school who were gamers, and I guess in the culture, it was in that transitional period where being a gamer didn't automatically make you a social outcast, as it might have even 5 years earlier, and at least in my high school. but there were the cool kids who played game, and the nerds who played games. And the nerds played everything, including Nintendo. And I remember Nintendo sent these GameCube and Game Boy Advance book covers for your textbooks. And I remember other gamers, like the cool kids making fun of me for that. Like, oh, GameCube sucks. Nintendo sucks, you know? It's all about Xbox. It's all about PlayStation. And I was like, hey, I had PlayStation, GameCube, and Xbox. I loved all the games and all of what all three of those systems had to offer. But I remember when Metroid Prime came out, and I'm like at the cafeteria showing off the manual, and some other kids like, oh, that's just a ripoff of Halo, and Nintendo's gonna stop making GameCube. Like, I heard it's going out of business, because this is not so long after the Sega Dreamcast, like a staple of the home console industry, collapsed and ended up making games for other systems. People saying, hey, no one likes GameCube. I heard that they're going to stop making them. And at one point, they actually did put the GameCube temporarily out of production, and retailers were actually going to Nintendo saying, like, hey, you have to make it worth our while to dedicate our shelf space to this product, because it's not moving. So GameCube was in a perilous position, and Game Boy Advance is carrying Nintendo at this point. And hey, like, you know, they don't have any. Like, once PSP comes out, Game Boy, it's obviously going to crush the Game Boy Advance. And so there's this tension, this concern on Nintendo message boards, communities, especially like the official Nintendo board that Nintendo had at times. Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox had official forums at that time. And PlayStation was... and Nintendo, they all would have their own official forums where people could just come talk about games. And I heard people on the Nintendo forum being really concerned about the PSP. Like, if this thing takes out Game Boy Advance, then what future does Nintendo have? They're gonna either go out of business or go third party. And so that's sort of the atmosphere going into E3 2003. And now this is... an age where most of our E3 news is still coming secondhand through IGN, GameSpy, through magazines. And Nintendo, the GameCube's not selling well. And I remember GameCube just had a very poor reputation, as we'll get into. But for example, the GameCube was actually more powerful, so notably more powerful than PlayStation 2, and rivaled the Xbox. But the GameCube's reputation was so poor that both online and in my personal life, I've known people who I could not convince them that GameCube was more powerful than PlayStation 2, because they would look at, hey, or they did not respect GameCube. A lot of people, even people I got along with, people I didn't get along with, people who even bullied me a bit because I still like Nintendo. But people would compare. Look at Wind Waker on GameCube. Look at Final Fantasy X on PlayStation. Look at Mario Sunshine on GameCube. Look at Halo on Xbox. GameCube is clearly way less powerful. And it's because they're following this thing where they're associating the art style of the games with how powerful the system is. And Wind Waker, the reveal of Wind Waker, really did damage the GameCube's reputation before it even came out in ways that is hard to convey. I know at least 3 or 4 people who were going to get GameCube and did not after they revealed Wind Waker. Even once it came out and it was a great game, they really just did not respect it. So this E3 is, like I said before, it's at the point where this was the first year where E3, the full press conferences were available for the public to watch, but we were not watching these live. Yeah, the videos, clips came up later, but we really read about these conferences filtered through the magazines, the websites. And this is George Harrison from Nintendo, Vice President of Sales and Marketing.
And many of these changes are already underway. But what won't change is our commitment to our core characters and our special talent in inventing and reinventing the world's best video game franchise characters.
And so what this is in context of, we have games like Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, Halo doing great on PlayStation and Xbox. Nintendo's gotten over the phase where they didn't want to have mature games on their system, like in the Super Nintendo era where they infamously had the censored version of Mortal Kombat. But that reputation of being a kid system is haunting Nintendo. And there's this common knowledge, this common talking point, that if Nintendo wants to be relevant, they need to ditch all these kiddie franchise characters and get into mature gaming. And every E-rated game on GameCube was seen as a mark against the credibility of the system and of Nintendo itself, which is ridiculous because PlayStation 2 was thriving off having the best variety of games in general, which included many E-rated adventure games like Jak and Daxter, like Ratchet and Clank, like the Crash Bandicoot games. So the idea that Nintendo had to be a 100% mature-only system in order to remain relevant is kind of absurd. But here, we're at a point where officials from Nintendo are being forced to directly address the idea that Nintendo has to abandon Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, Star Fox in order to remain relevant. So this quote here is kind of infamous, so let's hear what he has to say.
Now, we do insist that each installment of a franchise be better than the last, but our characters will remain true. Donkey Kong will remain a lovable ape, Link will never lose hope, and of course Mario will never start shooting hookers.
Yeah, that one got quoted a lot in the magazine. He thought that was clever, but it was really used online as a mark against Nintendo's credibility. And so, next we have Satoru Iwata coming out addressing the perilous position the GameCube was in, and even going as far as to say Nintendo is not going to leave the home console market, and if we leave the home console market, we're leaving the game industry. Because people are saying, hey, you do good with handhelds, maybe just ditch the GameCube, just stick with Game Boy Advance. And actually having to affirm that they are working on the successor to GameCube. So let's see what he has to say about that.
Nintendo GameCube. It had not sold through the way we planned, and its reputation among some players was unfavorable.
Yeah. I told you about that already.
We began to see worry about GameCube from some retailers and licensees. And finally, as always, there was yet another new competitor to our powerful Game Boy franchise. And
he's talking about the N-Gauge here. So what's about to happen here is the reveal of Four Swords Adventures. Part of what Iwata was saying is that he really felt like part of the reason GameCube wasn't selling like it should is because they hadn't properly explored why connectivity between Game Boy Advance and GameCube was an important reason to buy the GameCube. And so here we have a demo of Four Swords Adventures, and this is not something the general public saw at the time. This is something we heard about secondhand. And meanwhile, at this point, PlayStation and Xbox are focusing on their online services for networked online gaming, and Nintendo's focusing on connectivity between Game Boy Advance and GameCube. Now that there was Four Swords Adventures, and you can see the 4 players with 4 Game Boy Advances and 4 link cables playing on a GameCube together, where you can take independent action on the Game Boy Advance or play together on the GameCube, and it seamlessly switches between the two. Four Swords Adventures and Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles both needed 4 Game Boy Advance systems and 4 link cables in order to take full advantage of it. And that gave Game Boy Advance to GameCube connectivity the reputation of being very expensive and complicated, which was the opposite of what Nintendo wanted. Even though there were only 2 games that needed multiple Game Boys, multiple link cables to take full advantage. And really, this showing of Game Boy Advance GameCube connectivity with Four Swords Adventures, and now this what became Pac-Man Versus, this really was the Wii Music moment of its day. This was seen as an absolute embarrassment to Nintendo. It's like, hey, PlayStation and Xbox are talking about online gaming, which is the future of console gaming. Nintendo has all these pointless gimmicks. They have 4-player Pac-Man, which is a game from like 20 years ago that no one cares about anymore. And all these games where you have to have 4 cables and 4 Game Boys. And so they're saying it's user-friendly, but you need all these accessories in order to play it properly. And to this day, I encounter so many people who think that Pac-Man Versus, which is a fantastic game I actually own, I got to play this with my friends, you know, when I used to carry my GameCube around to friends' houses for parties like a Nintendo ambassador. So many people to this day still think that Pac-Man Versus requires 4 link cables and 4 Game Boys. That is absolutely not the case. So this showing at E3 was really bad for Nintendo, and we have the looming. So GameCube looks like it has no future. Nintendo doesn't look like it's serious about actually pushing the game horizon further with their home consoles, ignoring online gaming for Game Boy connectivity. And PSP is on the way. Once that knocks Game Boy Advance out the water, Nintendo has no future making hardware. So, in the context of this E3, Nintendo's future in the game industry looks very perilous, precarious. And there was rumors of the next Mario Party will have a means to play the game without a controller. And it was turned out to be a plug-in microphone that plugs into the controller ports of the GameCube. There was the infamous Megaton announcement, which really kind of caused the term Megaton to enter online gaming parlance, which about a Megaton announcement that would increase the sales of GameCube, made in Shonen Jump, which turned out to be a Naruto fighting game that never even left Japan. And in this context, rumors came about a mystery product. What that product was, no one had any idea, just rumors of a mystery product. Is it a new system? Is it the successor to Game Boy Advance? Is it a new console? There was, I think, even at this point, rumors of a third pillar, a third platform were sort of getting around. And then, on January 20th, 2004, straight out of nowhere, we get this. We get this press release. Just plain black and white text. This is how the Nintendo DS this is how the world became aware of Nintendo DS. It's just this press release went out the morning of January 20th, 2004. Nintendo announces dual-screened portable game system. Mystery product to launch later this year. Redmond, Washington, January 20th, 2004. An unprecedented approach to video gameplay, holding two separate game screens in the palm of your hand, hits the scene later this year when Nintendo introduces a new portable game system codenamed Nintendo DS. From information made available today, players can look forward to being able to manage their game progress from two different perspectives, enhancing both the speed and strategy of the challenge. For example, in a soccer game, users can view the whole game on one screen, while simultaneously focusing on an individual soccer player's tackle or goal on the other screen. Players will no longer be forced to interrupt gameplay to shift perspectives, such as moving from a wide shot to a close-up, or alternating between a character's ongoing battle and the map of the environment. Nintendo DS makes it possible to perform these tasks in real time by simply glancing from one screen to the other. Today's announcement is but a glimpse of the additional features and benefits that will be shown in full at the Electronic Entertainment Expo E3 in Los Angeles in May. Once fully revealed, players will see innovative advances in game interaction. Quote, "We have developed Nintendo DS based on a completely different concept from existing game devices in order to provide players with a unique entertainment experience from the 21st century," explains Satoru Iwata, Nintendo president. Nintendo DS features two separate 3-inch TFT LCD display panels, separate processors, and semiconductor memory of up to 1 gigabit. It is scheduled to launch worldwide before the end of 2004. In addition to Nintendo-developed software, the company is in discussions with third-party developers around the world. Nintendo DS will be marketed separately from the company's existing Game Boy Advance portable system and Nintendo GameCube home console. Now, this was all we had at the time. The touchscreen was not announced, it was not confirmed formally until E3 2004, which, as the press conference mentions, is in May. Now, the idea of a soccer game and being able to change your viewpoint immediately made me think, okay, this thing is capable of some kind of 3D. And just for a little bit of context, this here is something when you talk about a smartphone at the time, this is what a smartphone pretty much was. It was a BlackBerry or Palm Pilot-like device, physical keyboard or a number keypad, a touchscreen that used a stylus, and an actual aerial antenna. And so pretty early on, we started getting these rumors. This is 3 different mock-ups side by side. Now here we've got the Game Boy Advance SP over here on the right. And now what I initially imagined was the screens being horizontal. And this is interesting because this actually kind of resembles the Nintendo 2DS. actually, with the slab-like wide form factor here. But then this on the right, also on the left, also based clearly on the Game Boy Advance SP, pretty much nailed what the Nintendo DS was going to look like. There were many other hoaxed images. There was an images of some Sony president holding, I think they were holding like a Cly, which was Sony's touchscreen PDA, and they photoshopped it with a fake version of the DS. Yeah, I initially imagined the screens being side by side. But pretty early on, Nintendo, for some reason, thought that... I think Nintendo themselves clarified that the screens would be vertically arranged. Now, here we have Game Boy Advance DS. Thank you, Afizim, who made this mock-up here. Another, obviously based on the Game Boy Advance. This will never be able to properly fold up, of course. But you have many, many different takes on what the Game Boy Advance... what the Nintendo DS might be like. And... here, this one is a bit satirical because it's black and white and using, making it look like the original Game Boy, but the GameCube style controls was something that was, later on I do have a magazine that has a mock-up they made that does have GameCube style controls. But here we have, I don't want to be, this has might have a bit of an element of gloating, I told you so, aha, laugh at the naysayers, right? But even at the time, I don't know why, even in 2004, I felt the need to document into a text file, which luckily survived over the decades, and I still had access to some text from some, like, the Geek.com article that announced the DS initial press release. I copied some of the comments from that into a text file, and so here are some of these now. Unfortunately, I cannot find, even trying to find these archived is really difficult, but some quotes here. 2 screens. Nice try, Nintendo crap. Another one here. Third parties aren't going to make games for this. Nintendo is stupid, and they're going to go down like Sega. The next one. Who's going to want dual screens? Sounds like a dumb idea to me. And next we got, worst idea ever. And now this quote here is actually from the Nintendo Insider Forums, and it was from the Nintendo Insider Forums had mods that were NOA employees, but most of the mods were actually just volunteers from the public who the NOA employee mods selected as trusted members to do the moderation. But here we go. This is from one of the user mods on the non-Nintendo employee mods on the Nintendo Insider Forum. And I wish I had a lot more quotes from there. That forum is obviously defunct. Nintendo only has a forum for tech support now, but I will speak personally for myself that I am disappointed. I was hoping for something that would live up to the hype Nintendo is creating themselves. I am praying that this is a hoax, not the real thing. It's a sad, sad day in my mind, and I've been diehard Nintendo's only since 1984. And another quote, this is not from the Nintendo forums, this is probably from Geek.com or something, or some other tech news site, probably like Gizmodo or something like that. Nintendo is afraid that Sony is going to kick their butts in yet another game market, so they come out with this stopgap device. It won't work. Another quote here. Nintendo knows they're screwed. PSP is better than the DS in every way imaginable. DS is just an updated GBA. Same crappy graphics and power. Now this is based on nothing. They're just assuming that for some reason Nintendo's going to make a new piece of hardware and it'll just be the same graphics and power as the Game Boy Advance. So they're just assuming stuff and then gloating based on that assumption. And at this point, the PSP hardware itself, only that mock-up was shown in the footage of Death Jr. So here we have a couple of the more mocking, the more irreverent sort of parody mock-ups here. The new Nintendo BS, zoom view, power, stats, primary view, map, radar, health, all these different screens for every different little aspect. Experience a new angle of gaming coming fall 2004. And here's one. Now this is something I had to create from memory because I could not find this. I actually went hunting for this. I cannot find the original version of this meme. This is one of the most widely circulated images, and I've recreated it from memory here. It was depicted the Nintendo DS as being, it showed a picture of a Viewmaster, which if you don't know is a 3D viewer toy for viewing 3D photographs, and it would often have like cartoon licensed stuff, but also for regular 3D photographs as well. But left eye view is just a screenshot of Super Mario Brothers, and then the right eye view is a stock chart with Nintendo's stock prices like plummeting from the day that Nintendo DS was released in the then future of Q4 2004. So moving on now. So here we've got some actual screenshots. Most of these screenshots are all going to be from the IGN Nintendo forums. Now, so Dark Child DGL says, "Can you say Virtual Boy 2?" And now this is on January 20th itself. So this is right as it's announced. Now here's it's a little tiny, I know, unfortunately, but I'll read what it says. Limp Pimp 667, going full early 2000s with these screen names here. Ho hum, sounds interesting. I'm still looking forward to the PSP more though. At least fools now will stop attempting to compare the PSP to the GBA, since it seems like Nintendo is using this NDS to compete with the PSP. But with 2 screens, it sounds like it's going to be hard to make a decent game. So we're probably going to see a bunch of crappy third-party games come out for it. And separate processors? What are they going to use separate processors for? Each screen? Sounds like a waste of money and power to me, unless it's something truly innovative they haven't revealed yet. So that's a bit, very skeptical, but a little more balanced, not just... But the interesting point that they make here is people are comparing the PSP to the GBA and saying, like, GBA doesn't stand a chance. You're basically comparing Super Nintendo to PlayStation 2 here with PSP versus GBA. Nintendo's doomed. Here it's like, okay, they're going to have a new system. And here, Laze Bass Turd. That sounds like crap, Dave. But then again, that's what I said about the SP too. Shrug. Now, the Game Boy Advance SP, which I actually have here, I actually got this specifically because I was a self-conscious high school nerd, and I had a purple toy-like Game Boy Advance. This was when they announced I was getting a black Game Boy Advance and import it from Japan because that's where you had to get it from, and install the Afterburner mod into it before I have a frontlit screen. Hey, it's a sleek, tiny little Game Boy. It looks less toy-like, a little not so nerdy using it in public. It looks a bit more like a flip phone. So I got that imported as soon as it came out in Japan. So before they even started announcing or marketing the Game Boy Advance SP in North America, this thing, I felt a lot more confident on the school bus, being a self-conscious high school nerd at the time. But fortunately, I'm over that phase now. But our next quote, Nemesis45 says, "That's the stupidest idea since the Virtual Boy." And that's Virtual Boy. That's what you heard a lot. This is just going to be the next Virtual Boy. A lot of utterances of the Virtual Boy. Here I've got 2 quotes here. Pokenomew says, "That should be interesting. I'm kind of surprised it's not going to be another Game Boy. And beneath it, we have an account that's been deleted since then. Sounds complicated. I don't know if I could handle 2 screens at once." Also another reasonable. Now this quote is interesting. Now I know it's a little shrunken down. I don't know how well you could see that. But this is a user called, and you cannot change your username, I don't think, on IGN. I don't think. But their username is Earthbounder55. Their username is some fan art that's clearly based on the Wind Waker Toon Link art style. So this is not a Nintendo hater. This is someone who's into Nintendo. And what they said is, I put it out here so you can read it more easily, but what a stupid idea. Nintendo doesn't learn, do they? Microsoft and Sony succeed on mature titles and aesthetics, and Nintendo is off to the side fiddling with AOL, Purple Purse systems, and multi-screened Game Boys. So that's interesting. So this guy, at least at some point after this, got some artwork. This is not just a generic Nintendo hater. Likes Toon Link enough to have some kind of artwork of him. A screen name on a reference to Earthbound at a time when Earthbound did not have the following it has today. But they're frustrated. Nintendo doesn't learn. But once again, it's interesting. Sony and Microsoft succeed on mature titles and aesthetics. I mean, come on, PlayStation 2, so many family-friendly adventure and action games and platformers. And yeah, they also have Vice City. They also have Run Like Hell. They also have Final Fantasy X. But the idea that PlayStation was just mature titles, Nintendo's just kiddie titles, don't know where that came from. Even at the time, I thought it was bizarre. But yeah, I don't know what he's talking about in terms of fiddling with AOL, because the only thing I could think of in relation to Nintendo and AOL was the contest Nintendo had with AOL to pick a member of the public to attend. So like they picked like I think a dozen people to go to in a sweepstakes to go to E3006, and one of them got called on stage at random to play the Wii Sports, well Wii Tennis at the time, with Shigeru Miyamoto, Satoru Iwata, and Reggie Fils-Aimé. But yeah, calling the GameCube a purple purse, multi-screen Game Boys, so yeah, another negative one. Now here we have someone with a Wooper from Pokemon as their icon, so probably not an actual Nintendo hater, but someone frustrated with this. And mind you, before these earlier posts were on a different board within IGN. These posts are on a now defunct Animal Crossing board. So these are people who are into Nintendo. But some quotes from here. Nintendo should just go play 3D chess and make us things that are worth our time. So not impressed here. And Jay Conrady, we'll scroll down a bit. So we have this whole scenario they wrote out here. Probably because Nintendo didn't think about it for 10 seconds. It likely occurred one sunny morning in Japan at the Nintendo Bigwig meeting the day Sony unveiled its handheld plans. What? Sony's coming out with a handheld system? Iwata-san, what do we do? 2 screens? Brilliant! Quick, patent and trademark that baby. Yes, and we could call it DS for dual screen or double screens. Brilliant! Write that down. So, another expression, as we saw before, of this just being this stopgap system Nintendo sort of just pulled out of their rear end out of a panic to try to come out with something to not look totally obsolete next to the PSP. So Night Blazer's comment here, I got the quote down here. Another handheld. Damn it, Nintendo. What's with your fetish for making handhelds recently? When do you realize that you should be focusing on keeping your dying GC GameCube alive and keeping your first-party games in check? To hell with handhelds. Game Boy Advance has some decent ports and remakes, but that won't change my opinion of them. Consoles greater than June, Nintendo. Yeah, J00. Yes, anything greater than J00. Yeah, that is some real early 2000s net speak right there. Now here we have Conrady again. And Conrady, we quoted them before. Yeah, they're the one who came up with the scenario before about them just sort of hurriedly coming up with this. Now they're skeptical, they're skeptical, and even at the time I would have disagreed with them on some of these points, but they put a lot of thought into this. So let's read out what they had to say. I just read it over at the GC General Board. Even they seem disappointed, and they love everything Nintendo does. You must have read some different threads. Now I see comments like Nintendo isn't hyping it to be a big thing. It's a third pillar, and Nintendo is being modest about it, and Iwata said that only 10% of gamers would probably like the idea. In other words, excuses. Now, think about that. Why would a company actually come out and say that it's not a big thing, yet dedicate its resources of it being like a third pillar? Even Nintendo doesn't seem fully behind it. On top of that, why would a company develop something and spend millions on its creation for only 10% of gamers, as they admit, would likely be in favor of? As for the frosting of this wonderful Nintendo cake, what possible advantage or interesting gameplay will 2 screens offer? Not only for the player, but for the developers as well. It will be interesting and innovative, as in the Virtual Boy definition of Nintendo's dictionary. The fans of Nintendo will follow it because Nintendo says it's innovative, yet at the same time doesn't even seem too high up on its new product to be released this very year. Developers will not support the system for this single reason, is it's completely unnecessary, and firms such as Konami, Square Enix, or Capcom, already questionable support of Nintendo systems, will not dedicate more money and resources to such a thing. That turned out to be exactly not true, and to continue with this quote, that and Nintendo's high development fees, but they'll likely try to sway developers by offering deals to develop on other platforms. We all know what Nintendo needs to do. Too bad Nintendo doesn't. Quit wasting money on things your company doesn't need, and begin consolidating your own in-house development firms. Pool your resources and start offering software rather than planning out your franchises to out-of-house groups. That's it. Simple. You've been going downhill for years in both software and market share. You don't garner more market share by releasing more hardware. Once nicely produced software begins to emerge, and Nintendo shows that it itself is in support of its current system, then that nasty problem of poor sales and poor developer support might begin to ease down. Nintendo has the money, just not the central management ability to actually achieve such a thing. Instead of using millions, let's say for a first-rate RPG, Nintendo has the talent, just not the dedication, they decide to waste it on something as, quite honestly, is a gimmicky thing. Instead of trying to entice developers to develop for your console by waving a GBA in front of their face, how about lowering your production fees you force them to pay? Instead of relying on Miyamoto for every damn thing, try dedicating yourself to other teams so that they too can not only release great things, but in greater number as well. A developer with tons of money and production teams relying on other developers to pan out your titles for game development doesn't show power. It shows weakness and lack of interest in your own corporation. If you want comparisons, look at Square and its failed movie, Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. You see, the difference is that Square learned its lesson really damn quick, and what are they doing now? Going back to what they know best, game development. On top of that, they strike a huge merger with Japan's top publisher, Enix. Now Square can concentrate completely on game development, which is what they're doing and do best, while Enix publishes them, which is what they do best. They know this is the road to success, and looking at Square Enix's early financial reports for the end of this fiscal year, they are 100% correct. In the case of Nintendo, they cut their price tags and develop something they don't need instead of doing what they do best, or used to rather, which is develop software. Nintendo can no longer release something, put their tried and true seal of quality on it, and expect the masses of people to be like sponges and soak it up. Nintendo has sunk to relying on gimmicks and unneeded items in the vein of Sega and its success with the Sega CD and 32X. So yeah, very detailed take, completely wrong about everything pretty much, but that was, I didn't want to just take, well, to one extent, just taking the negative excitement comments aren't as interesting, because, you know, the incorrect takes are more interesting to look at. They're more amusing. But this is what I want. I don't want just the trolly, like, I told you Nintendo sucks. This proves it. No, not just those kind of remarks, but the ones where they really did put thought into why they thought this was a bad idea and going to hurt Nintendo. Now, what we have here is, I don't know, well, you can see that, but this is a quote, a screenshot. Even in 2004, I immediately took the screenshot of this. This is on the 25th of April 2004. At this point, we're getting rumors of a touchscreen. We're getting rumors of wireless capabilities and Wi-Fi, rumors of Wi-Fi, rumors of touchscreen, and rumors of what became PictoChat, which is like sort of a messaging application that was built in the Nintendo DS, where DSs within local wireless range could send messages to each other using either hand-drawn handwriting and doodles with the touchscreen, or using a touchscreen keyboard. And Zach 2387, I'm so sorry, Zach. I'm going to be laughing is the name of this thread, and this is on Nintendo's official forum, but I'm going to be laughing when the DS doesn't have instant messaging and a touchscreen and all of y'all are mad. I mean, come on. How could it have those things? And why would it? Instant messaging? Then it'll have some kind of Wi-Fi, which is seriously doubtful. And plus, where would the keyboard be? What, are you going to have to select each letter out using only a couple of buttons? That's ridiculous. And a touchscreen? What would be the use of that? There's no logical reason to have those things, and I doubt it will. These are just some stupid rumors that people started and they spread. Nintendo hasn't confirmed these. Plus, I wouldn't get my hopes up on GBA backward compatibilities, although this is the most likely feature out of the three. I mean, why would it be able to play GBA games? It's not a Game Boy. They're making another Game Boy. And the DS won't even use cartridges. That's my take on the DS. Yeah, arguably the only thing he technically got right was that the DS won't use cartridges. Nintendo, the cartridge medium they used with Nintendo Switch and Nintendo DS, Nintendo refers to them as game cards, but functionally they're effectively cartridges. People commonly called them cartridges. And Nintendo, part of the reason they focused on the idea of cards is because it made it sound a little less obsolete compared to the PSPs, the UMD optical discs. You know, oh, they're cards. No, like, oh, Nintendo's using obsolete cartridge technology. Meanwhile, Sony has optical discs. Meanwhile, the PSP successor comes out and it's using the same obsolete cartridge technology that, excuse me, stretching an itch here, that the DS was panned for back in 2004, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, so every single thing he said was wrong. And so it had instant messaging and a touchscreen, had the Picto chat, the touchscreen, and it's like, but it's also important to not just make fun of them, but to look at the mindset a lot of people had this time. How could it have those things? How could it have instant messaging? How could it have a touchscreen? Like, how could it even have a touchscreen? And then instant messaging, you'll have to have some kind of Wi-Fi, which is seriously doubtful. They're doubting it's even going to have Wi-Fi, which it did end up having. And then where would the keyboard be? So he's not even thinking, oh, touchscreen. Oh, it's going to have a touchscreen, a keyboard on the touchscreen that you use the touchscreen to operate the keyboard. No, he's thinking like a physical keyboard attachment that attaches to the system. Or either that or you're going to have to peck it out using only a couple of buttons, like when you make a, nickname your Pokemon in a Pokemon game for GBA or something like that. And like, what would be a touchscreen, what would be the use of that? So they're not even thinking in terms of what a touchscreen could do for gaming. They're just like, a touchscreen, that's for PDAs, that's for selecting your emails on a Palm Pilot. That's not for gaming. And here we go. And so this, before we move on, I'll just talk about, so this started a long period of me on the Nintendo Insider forums, on different forums, speculating. Every morning I would get up, and I'd do a news search in Google, and under the news category of Google, back when that was a relatively new thing, search for Nintendo DS, look at all the latest rumors. I'd go on Gizmodo a lot, I remember, looking for rumors about any leaks, any speculation on Nintendo DS. And I remember, and I was counting, this is the first year where I was really counting down until E3. So here we're about to see the reveal of PlayStation Portable at Sony's E3 2003 presentation. Xbox and PlayStation's press conferences were on the 10th. Nintendo's was on the 11th. And so the day before, being a Nintendo-focused gamer, I'm on the Nintendo boards looking for the final rumors, final speculation, chomping at the bit for news on Nintendo DS, but I'm also excited about PSP. I was very concerned about the PSP destroying the Nintendo's viability in the handheld game space and it possibly being the end of Nintendo, but I was also excited for PSP, the idea of full 3D on a system, the idea of a multimedia device, and your music, your movies, and console quality gaming on a handheld was all very exciting to me. And so the day before, we get the news trickling out from all the websites, the magazines, which wouldn't be out for, a few weeks from this point, about the PSP, from GameSpy, IGN, and the like. And poor Ken really is holding out for that applause here. This is the first actual glimpse of the final PSP unit, and he's really holding out for that applause, and it does not come. It's kind of awkward. The PSP is such a beautiful piece of hardware. I got that thing the day it came out in North America. It was a beautiful piece of hardware. Nice, solid feeling. For a device with an optical drive, it felt nice and solid.
Thank you.
And just to remind you, this is a world before the iPhone, before tablets as we know them today, before smartphones. So a device that small, but it's not an HD screen, but a high-resolution screen. The idea that it runs on optical discs. Now, the UMDs are so cool. They actually fit inside little cartridges, effectively, that protected the disc. And we look back here, that memory stick duo, that's the PSP. This is before SD cards really became ubiquitous. So for a while, Sony really was kind of dominating using these proprietary memory stick devices with all of their VAIO laptops, their Cli PDAs, their PSP here. We use the memory stick duo. And UMDs were so cool. I mean, but it's not cool when you have a bus ride and you're waiting 30 seconds for your thing to load, which happens sometimes on Wipeout. Now these graphics, it is so. Those graphics on a handheld were mind-blowing, without a doubt. So once again, as many other competitors to handhelds, we're targeting teens and adults with this.
secondary
We're
target
making this isn't a kid's
is the
toy
teen
anymore.
market. As you can see, it is black with the
And
majority of
the
real
PSP
estate
actually
taken up
shipped
by a
with
beautiful
the UMD of
LCD
Spider-Man
display.
2. And
The product
watching
dimensions
Spider-Man
are
2 on that thing was
170
quite an
millimeters long,
experience.
74 millimeters high, and
Really
23
getting into the
millimeters deep.
dimensions of it.
In total, it weighs 260 grams. And as I mentioned, the screen is one of the
And the screen was
product's
not
key
HD,
features,
but it was
and it is very
a
different
beautiful
from what is
16 by 9
currently on the
screen.
market.
And so here we've got, this is the moment that I first saw Nintendo DS, or at least its prototype form, as you see on my E3 2004 shirt that I bought on eBay not long after E3 itself at the time. And by the way, I'm wearing the shirt backwards because the front of the shirt actually just to see it, touch it, play it, all the interesting stuff's on the front. So whenever I'd wear the shirt, I'd wear it backwards. And it's kind of cool now knowing that the DS did not launch in this prototype form. They redesigned it before it even came out. But I remember plugging in my telephone line into my 2001 model iBook, my laptop at the time, pre-MacBook, an iBook, a 2001 model, plugging in my phone line, dialing up AOL, and there we've got it. We've got the Nintendo DS. I'm like, there it is. And I'm like, it's a 3D Mario Kart game. Like 3D on Nintendo's handheld confirmed. So it's not going to be too... Because there's that concern, people like we saw in that quote, hey, this is just an updated GBA, same crappy graphics and power, it's not going to hold... No, it's actually a fully 3D handheld fully 3D Nintendo handheld. So the idea of these handhelds having polygonal 3D graphics alone was just a big deal, and Nintendo wasn't going to be left out of that. And I was happy about the design for the Nintendo DS, even in this prototype form. I mean, if you check out the early, the original model Game Boy Advance, it's nostalgic to me now. I got the purple one to match them with the GameCube, but like I said before, being a self-conscious high school nerd, it looks so toy-like, and I'm like, oh yeah, as soon as they announced the Game Boy Advance SP, and especially in the black color, which did not come out in America, I think, until 2004 or 5, and did not, so I imported it in black, much more like, the flip phones that those handful of cool kids who even had cell phones at all in high school back then had. I mean, at the time, for those, to give a sense of perspective, I was the first kid, and actually the only kid in my high school, to have an iPod, and I got made fun of for it. It's like, what is that, a Game Boy? What is this weird, nerdy little computer thing? Just get a Walkman like everyone else. Why do you need a weird little computer thing that looks like a Game Boy? That's the era in which I'm in high school. So, even an iPod was kind of seen as eccentric. It's a very new thing at the time. And so, let alone having a cell phone, and smartphones aren't even thought of yet. So, the device, to look as sleek as it does, a little chunky, not very pretty. I mean, even what became known as the DS Fat, the launch model DS, was not very pretty. But for my standards, I just didn't want it to look like a toy. It's relatively sleek compared to the original model Game Boy Advance. And I'm like, there it is. So I was able to download that first image of the Nintendo DS to my computer, and I remember going to the school. Now, for a bit of context, I have this right here. I did not have this at the time, but for a bit of context, I have a fine motor disability that profoundly impacts my ability to do handwriting in a typical classroom setting and keep up. So this is a machine called the AlphaSmart Neo 2, which is a word processor made for primarily for disabled students like me. I did not have this at the time. I didn't know it existed. I actually would have liked that a lot if I knew it. But what I had as a notebook was a 2001 model iBook. And so I remember during the period where I was selling tickets to some movie night event we're doing at the computer club, and just sitting there with my laptop, and I just was said that to explain why I had a laptop in school at a time when kids don't even have iPods and cell phones yet. So it's kind of incongruent because it talked about how tech was still kind of like what, an iPod? What is that? Or, just get a Walkman. Meanwhile, I have a freaking laptop, before most people even have phones. But I remember I was able to show friends hey, look, this is all my nerdy friends who were into gaming in general and not just like, you know, PlayStation and Xbox, like look, like they revealed the DS. Here's what it looks like. And I was able to save a high resolution version of that photo. And I remember waiting all day, like just chomping. And because mind you, this is pre-Wi-Fi. The school didn't have Wi-Fi. My laptop didn't have Wi-Fi. Like we had broadband, hardline broadband for our family computer, but my laptop still had 56K. So I wasn't able to get any more news or updates about what was going on with E3. So I remember E3 was that week. I got a desktop. I would set like a desktop to change every 1 minute. I'd get nighttime views of Akihabara in Japan, in Tokyo. And that was always what I do traditionally for E3, like this cool night scene, this really technologically savvy city with lots of electronic shops. So that kind of set the mood for what I was doing, where I was at the day they revealed the Nintendo DS properly. Yep, so yeah, I downloaded this image and showed it off to all my friends, and this is all I had until I got home that day. I was just so excited that, like, oh man, it looks cool. It doesn't look toy-like the Game Boy Advance did, and just full 3D on a handheld. Now, I do think the gap between the upper and lower screens was a lot narrower. It wasn't so severe on the final version that they did launch with. And so I get home in time to watch Nintendo's E3 presentation. This is the first thing that I ever watched live on the internet. And I went to e3.nintendo.com to see what first thing when I got home. Run off the school bus, get home, go to e3.nintendo.com, and this was like something that showed in the corner. It wasn't like high resolution full screen. This is something that was happening in the corner. I'm like, wow, I can actually see Nintendo's presentation. Now, I do have a full length unabridged commentary of Nintendo's E3 presentation. There'll be a link to it. Look in the info for this video. There'll be a link to it. But for now, we're just going to look at the conference focusing on Nintendo themselves. So we've got Nintendo really, like 2003, Nintendo in 2003 had to make the case they still deserve to be taken seriously as a player in the video game industry, as a hardware manufacturer, and they kind of failed. They pretty much failed to do that. We have Iwata literally refuting rumors that they're going to discontinue GameCube, that they're going to leave the industry. That's how bad it was. And so this year we have the public appearance of the new Vice President of Sales and Marketing, Reggie Fils-Aimé, a more imposing figure, a bit of a cheesy, his infamous, opening that we'll hear in a moment. But it was really important for people to hear a confident Nintendo, a strong Nintendo.
And we're about
really,
making games.
so it's like, hey, I'm about kicking ass, I'm about taking names, we're about making games. Jump straight into Metroid Prime 2. And they opened the conference with a number of different, a little more action-packed, a bit edgier games like Resident Evil 4, Baten Kaitos, the new Star Fox game.
So let's get a couple things straight.
And so, I'll let Reggie do a lot of the talking here to an extent, but this is really the Nintendo. In 2003, they had to argue that they still deserve to be taken seriously and failed. This is Reggie no, we're here to stay. This is the new Nintendo, and we're not taking any nonsense from you, anyone who thinks we don't deserve to be taken seriously.
So let's get a couple things straight right off the bat. I understand if you're among the terminally hip, Nintendo isn't your only choice for gaming. But maybe what you've already seen helps you understand that we're serious about expanding what we do. We also understand that we're not going to run our company just for hardcore gamers.
Because once again, there was a sense that for Nintendo to be relevant, they had to basically abandon they had to dump Pokemon, dump Star Fox, dump Mario, dump Pikmin, dump all of those family-friendly franchises and just be nothing but, I guess, what we would now call dude bro games. And Nintendo's saying, no, we're expanding what we're doing, but we're not going to run our company just for the dude bro gamers, as they might be called these days.
Good morning. Reggie mentioned.
And here we have George Harrison again. Not as quite as charismatic, not as much of a stage presence. A nice guy by all accounts, but he's the numbers guy. He's going to get into the graphs and charts because he really has to take the numbers that they have and make the case that Nintendo is doing good. Now, the idea that if you even said that Nintendo wasn't on the verge of collapsing, you were kind of not. It was hard to be taken seriously. So he's saying like, hey, they dropped the price of GameCube down to $99 late in the previous year, so they have a lot of momentum from that. And
what's
so
going
we'll hear.
on the market right now. So let's take a look. This graph shows the industry sales.
And at this point,
Nintendo over the last
E3 is in this weird limbo between being a business event for the industry and being a pep rally for the public. So he goes really deep into these charts. If you want to hear me comment on all this in depth, I have the unabridged commentary elsewhere. Oh yeah, listen to him go.
So far in 2004, we sold more games per system than Microsoft, and we're closing in on Sony. Now overall, the three systems combined have sold about 38 million units in this generation. And we believe that the potential for this generation is more than 55 million units. That means there are almost 20 million units still to be sold.
So 38 plus 20, 38, 40, 50 million. The Switch has outsold that on its own. The industry's changed so much.
Will have some initial appeal for
So here's
exactly
addressing the PSP.
in this audience today. But in this election year, let me put it this way. By the time the PSP gets on the ballot next spring, more than 25 million Americans will have already voted for Game Boy Advance.
So it's kind of funny because that commenter on the forum was like, okay, I'm glad they announced the DS because people are trying to frame it as PSP versus GBA, and it's like, okay, that's like PS2 versus Super Nintendo. The PSP is clearly going to cream the Game Boy Advance. From Nintendo's perspective, they're seeing PSP versus GBA as actually like a position of strength because they have this huge install base that they think they really feel confident putting the PSP up directly up against the Game Boy Advance, Nintendo themselves, which is interesting.
Now, if you're asking...
Now, I mean, once again, this is kind of disingenuous because, let's say GameCube and PS2, right? PS2 came out in 2000, GameCube didn't come out until 2001. Sony had an advantage; they were able to get a big install base in on Nintendo before they could even get started. But here, it's like Game Boy Advance came out in 2001. This is 2004 now, late 2004 when PSP launched in Japan. This is clearly going to be a matter of a new generation and not just Sony trying to get market share against GBA.
PSP can catch Game Boy Advance, maybe we should first ask, can the PS2 catch Game Boy Advance?
The idea that any Nintendo system was in any way outselling any Sony system was kind of quite the boast.
Game Boy Advance has sold more units than PlayStation 2 in America.
Now look how now that's true. These numbers are from NPD, which is a third-party source. That's not Nintendo. So they could say, hey, GBA's outsold PS2 in North America and this very specific time period. But look how they frame how they scale their chart. Visually, it makes it look like Game Boy Advance has sold double what the PS2 has. So these numbers are real, but they're also damn lies, and statistics. And given the position Nintendo was in at the time, I mean, if I was being paid to, I probably would myself. Here we have the reveal of DS itself.
This is Nintendo DS.
Even though it had been revealed via press releases, like the USA Today website, what the system looked like had already been revealed. This is maybe 2 or 3 hours after those articles started going out.
From the time we announced its code name, you've known these.
And just to be clear, this is an abridged. Just like with PSP. This is an abridged.
But that's not
presentation of the DS reveal. We're using here. I'm using a lot of B-roll and stuff that was not part of the system itself at the time, or part of the presentation itself.
New tools to work with.
For illustrative purposes, if you want the full press conference as it was, you're gonna have to look for my unabridged review of Nintendo's E3 2004 presentation.
Admit it. Your left brain looks at a vehicle in terms of the numbers. What's the horsepower, the towing capacity, the 0 to 60?
And they had 2 models. They had a red DS prototype and a black DS prototype.
There's only one question.
They already had
out
the
there.
sense that they would be
Sitting behind the
clamshell
wheel, where will this
cases.
baby take
Now,
you?
one thing I want to say real quick is if you see these, I don't know how a number of these ended up leaking, because even before 2004 ended, somehow I got like I think it was for Wired magazine or something, there was a woman dressed like for the beach, in a, wearing like a top and a bathing suit pretty much, and like a beach chair, and she is playing that prototype Nintendo DS. And I'm like, how did she get that? It's unmistakable what that is. And eventually, some prototypes leaked to private collectors that are not even painted. Because here we have like this plastic that's painted silver. And the prototypes that leaked weren't even painted. They were just opaque,
In other
like
words,
beige
you
plastic.
want to go just a little bit faster down the same streets you've always driven.
Now, at this point
or
in the
down a new
presentation, you have to remember they've
road
only
to
shown
places you've never
the
seen
system
before.
itself. They haven't
That's
shown any gameplay to the people in the
difference
audience.
with Nintendo DS. Let's
And mind
start
you, in a
with the
world
screen.
before smartphones and
Each
mobile
is
internet,
programmable in 2D or
now
3D.
this is something I
choice is
inserted,
up
but
to
this
the
is
game
not something
designer.
that's part of the presentation
This
as
opens a wealth
people
of
in the audience would be
options
seeing
for
it.
for the developers, and they're
So
totally excited about
all
it.
this gameplay stuff, if you're on the
3D
move
quality
going to
is
these
simply
on this
beautiful.
press tour, you would not have seen probably
Most
gameplay
of you
footage at this
remember
point.
How you felt the first time you
This
saw
would have been
Super
this right here would have been the
Mario
first footage they
64
saw.
on Nintendo 64. It was a breakthrough that took the industry by storm.
Now at this point, this game was being called
this is
Super
Nintendo
Mario
DS
64x4 for the fact that it had up to 4
on
players.
our new portable system, just as you'll see it on the show floor tomorrow. Isn't it exciting?
Yeah, well, from what I understand, there was a certain number of fans from the public they allowed to enter the theater,
Or take two different perspectives
and
of the
in
same
addition to the
battle.
regular journalists. So a
Or
lot of Nintendo
monitor
fans hooting and
constantly
hollering,
available maps and
where
menus.
Sony's was more professional only.
Here's a brand new Metroid game playing on Nintendo DS.
Yeah, just before Metroid Prime 2 even comes out, just drops a first-person shooter, Metroid Prime, on a handheld at a time when 3D on a handheld is a
The
whole
same
new
way
concept.
You'll be playing it tomorrow.
And so this is how Metroid Prime Hunters was revealed.
Targeting and shooting now moves beyond buttons. Just tap the screen where you want to fire. Metroid's
That's how
mission
the
has
official
always been
confirmation of the
nerve-wracking,
touchscreen. You hear the
but
oohs and
now
ahs from the
they're
audience.
nonstop. Because all of your map positioning
Now
and
he's saying
weapon-
just tap the screen where you want to fire. Metroid Prime Hunters ended up really de-emphasizing that. You use the bottom screen as more like a touchpad mouse, with the action taking place on the upper
changes
screen.
are done on the fly. It's just awesome. 2 media bays. One accommodates DS software, easily holding games with 1 gigabit of data.
Yeah, that's
and
1
well
gigabit,
beyond.
not 1 gigabyte.
The other
A lot of people
plays
accuse
all of
Nintendo
your
of
favorite
being
GBA
misleading
games.
by trying to make people think that their cartridges could hold a
Responding to either
gigabyte when it was
stylus
really a
Or
gigabit.
to your fingertip. It's transformative.
So
Whether
touchscreen.
you're inputting data onto a software keyboard,
Software
or
keyboard.
actually changing the direction or
Yeah, here's
viewpoint
Wario.
of your gameplay,
This is also footage I
it's
edited
truly
in.
unique.
But of WarioWare
The
Inc.
combination
DS, one of the
two screens
fantastic
and
game,
touchscreen
probably the best
stands for
WarioWare game in my
reinvent
opinion.
gameplay. You can only
Aside
find this
from the
on
original,
Nintendo.
at least
You
that
can
I've played. I
only
haven't played the last
feel
one that
this
came out
on
on Switch.
Nintendo. And besides touch, there's talk. The built-in microphone can be married to voice recognition programs.
Yeah, that came in good use on
That means
Nintendo,
your voice
Nintendo's
and
Brain Age
only
games.
Your voice can control the play. Together, touch and voice opens vast new realms of game interaction. If you're looking for the future of gaming, look at the interface. Wireless capability.
And I know there are people saying at the time, a lot of naysayers saying, like, oh, touchscreen is just a gimmick, or, oh, they're trying to appeal to kids, because kids love touchscreen stuff on, like, ATM, playing with touchscreen stuff. So a lot of people really just refuse to take touchscreen seriously. Meanwhile, every device since then has touchscreen. So Nintendo really was ahead of the game in terms of, like, hey, this is going to be the future of handheld gaming and handheld devices in general. Nintendo was on it.
The range extends up to 100 feet. Think about different seats in an office, a lecture hall, an airplane. Specifically, imagine instant chat and draw.
There's PictoChat,
transmitted
which was
exactly
bundled
like
in
you
with the
created
Nintendo DS
in your
family.
handwriting. your little works of art will look the same way on other screens as they do on your own. But what if your friend is more than a few feet away?
So that's
say,
local
a few
wireless. Here they
time
confirm the
zones away?
Wi-Fi.
No problem.
But then it would have to have some kind of Wi-Fi, which is extremely doubtful. You know, we see how that turned out.
Wi-Fi means you can connect via the net. It's beyond online. It's no line. The change that DS represents, and indeed
Now, the first
all of
time
the new Nintendo
I saw, like, when I actually saw this, I got off the school bus and got in and logged into e3.nintendo.com. This is the point from which I actually saw the presentation.
of our worldwide
The first time I saw it, like, while it was
Satoru
live.
Iwata.
And I had to go back and
Please
watch the
join
rest.
me in welcoming him.
Thank you.
And I've once again, I've abridged this significantly. If you want the full unabridged,
With the NES,
you know, presentation, you go follow my link and you'll see
we are
in my
proud
info, and you'll see my
we established
unabridged
portable gaming
commentary.
with Game Boy. All these advances are now industry standards. All make us proud. But I think we are most proud of this.
You know, it's interesting that there's no, like, demo or, like, the Nintendo DS logo on the screens, but they probably decided it would photograph better to everyone's flash photography without anything on the screens at all.
All of those innovations changed games, and so will Nintendo DS. DS is not simply new. It's not just more functions or higher specs. It is different.
Now, just for those who aren't familiar with this presentation, they also go into detail regarding, Iwata goes into detail about, you know, he name drops Revolution, revealing the code name for their next home console, saying that their next home system will be innovative in the same way DS is. And then they reveal the Legend of Zelda, the new Legend of Zelda for GameCube, which eventually came out for GameCube and Wii, Twilight Princess, the realistic Zelda game, which people like were clamoring for since they revealed the cartoon like Wind Waker. I was excited. I loved Wind Waker. I loved this as well tremendously. Like, I just love when Legend of Zelda changes radically, and I was very excited to say the least.
As you've seen, Nintendo DS is not standing still. As a 10th serious competitor decides to make a run at Game Boy, DS raises the bar on portable gaming before they even get started. Nintendo DS is a third way to play. It defines its own category. It reinvents portable entertainment.
Now, the whole idea of DS as a third pillar, it's often, even to this day, is frequently used as, oh, Nintendo lies all the time. Like when they said DS would be a third pillar, wouldn't replace Game Boy Advance. Nintendo ran the Game Boy Advance. Hold on, I get my props out. Nintendo ran Game Boy Advance alongside DS for several years, up until 2006. For 2 full years, even up until early 2007, Nintendo supported both the Game Boy Advance and the DS. And you have to also... Nintendo, there was no guarantee that DS wouldn't be the next Virtual Boy, so they had to keep their Game Boy Advance development pipeline up and running, so if DS failed, they have a backup. And plus, they did support the two systems side by side with some significant releases. So yeah, Nintendo really was serious about maintaining the DS as a third pillar to Game Boy and Game Boy Advance and GameCube. And so, just seeing Metroid Prime Hunters, just seeing a screenshot of a first-person shooter Metroid game on a handheld was just really incredible. And you get the images trickling out of E3, the footage of a lot of demos that I don't really haven't gathered footage for. Things like Pac Pix, you know, a game where you draw a Pac-Man that animates on the touchscreen. There's a Sonic demo. There was the Yu-Gi-Oh. Hold on. Yeah, there was the Yu-Gi-Oh demo of what a Yu-Gi-Oh game could be like on Nintendo DS. using the touchscreen to have the cards, and then the upper screen to show the battles playing out when the monsters attack and defend, and when magic cards are used. Now, this is the EGM after E3 2004, covering DS and PSP. And I supported both systems. I was excited that handheld gaming in general was advancing so rapidly. But when you put the Nintendo DS, especially that E3 prototype, like I've got on my shirt, compared to the PSP, it was still common knowledge, like, is this really a competition? Like, Nintendo's about to get steamrolled. We respect what they've done for the industry. They make great games, but why should we take this seriously compared to the PSP? And there was a balanced coverage, but it really was kind of, even in this magazine, leaning a bit more towards PSP as the obvious favorite. And now also at E3 2004, they had this footage. Now there's gonna be a link to the person who recorded this footage. This concept video where Charles Martinet would introduce this concept footage of the idea of Nintendo DS as a lifestyle device, of people using it in their everyday life. They show teens using it to PictoChat to gossip about other teens, and they show what else? They show a little kid playing Nintendogs under the covers at night. So they show different audiences, and I will give a credit to who this came from. I'm only using a little bit of this footage because this is unique footage. If this person did not record this, Nintendo never released this footage outside of direct feed to the public. This would be lost media if this person did not get out his camcorder, which was not an easy thing to do at the time. This was probably recorded on an actual magnetic tape. This is before smartphones. You could just pull out your camera and whatever. This is before GoPros, right? And one of the audiences that they show, one of the groups they show doing this is adult professionals. So we have users in an airline terminal. That guy has his DS. This guy here pulls out his DS. He's playing Metroid Prime Hunters. And this was kind of ridiculed a bit at the time. Like, what is Nintendo thinking? Like, does Nintendo seriously think that, adults, let alone, like, older adults, are going to be running around with DSs playing games on it? But Nintendo, it had been forgotten at that point. Even with Game Boy Advance, more than a third of their audience with Game Boy Advance was over the age of 18. And when you get to the early 90s with the original Game Boy, the adult, not just like 18 to 20, but like, older adult professionals with time to kill in airline terminals, on commutes, in waiting rooms, actually was about half of Nintendo's business. Nintendo had a training video on how to train their salespeople to sell the Game Boy. And they says, remember, half of our Game Boy players, not just adults buying it for their kids, but half of our active players are adults. And so them gearing the DS back towards adults, older adults, non-traditional game-playing age adults, is actually kind of a return to form to Nintendo's handheld business that people really kind of forgot and didn't know how to take seriously. Now this is an actual commercial from 1990. Check this out.
It's called a Game Boy, the personal game-playing system from Nintendo, with lots of sports, action, and puzzle games to choose from. And it comes with a puzzle game Tetris. It could change your outlook.
I'm sorry, sir. Your flight's been delayed.
I mean, there's a picture of Hillary Clinton on an airplane playing a Game Boy. Nintendo had a lot of success with this older adult market with the original Game Boy, and they're moving back in that direction with DS. So it wasn't quite... They didn't have anything quite to show that catered to that audience. They're showing them playing Metroid Prime Hunters. It doesn't. It's more of a hardcore traditional, teen to 20s-year-old sort of hardcore gamer type appeal with that game. But when you got things like Brain Age, Sudoku Gridmasters, Big Brain Academy, the Picross DS, like the Tetris DS, a lot of these games, even Professor Layton, a lot of these games that actually did appeal to that older, non-traditional gameplay audience that, in a decade down the line, would probably be playing more on mobile. Now, this game here, they had a submarine demo that I don't know if they were calling it Steel Diver at that point, but at E3 2004 and 2005, they showed off this submarine demo for Nintendo DS. And I remember going on SpyMac, which was a Macintosh forum. It was kind of a general tech forum, and people there generally were hardcore Team PSP. Like, why is Nintendo even doing this? Like, what is the point of this? Why have? Well, a lot of you would hear a lot was, why have two screens, two small screens when you just have one large screen, which is the obvious choice. And like, what do you use a touch screen for? Like, what's the point of this? And this was one of the perfect use cases, is that touchscreen hadn't been done. I mean, it had been done on the Tiger Gamecom, but on a mainstream gaming system, it had not been done yet. And the dual screen setup really allowed the touchscreen to be fully dedicated to being an input device, and it allowed the upper screen to be fully dedicated to the output. So you have your touchscreen could be fully do its thing and shine as an input device, not having to worry about sharing space for having your output. And that was, I think, one of the best use cases for DS. I was really disappointed that this did not come out on the DS, though it did eventually come out as Steel Diver for the Nintendo DS. And there wasn't a lot to the game for Steel Diver on 3DS, but it was still a good game, and I'm glad they came out. It really was would have shown as a $10, $15 eShop game, but the eShop was not up at that point in the 3DS's lifespan. So Submarine was a game I had my eye on just as a validation of the use case for having two screens. And we saw a little of this earlier. We have these kind of odd trailers that Nintendo put out. No real full-fledged games. A lot of what Nintendo showed were demos that were very early on. Nintendo revealed this footage to the public. We just have this whirring wind sound effects and some of the voice yell, Yahoo! Yahoo! Really limited audio in a lot of these games, just very, very simple, basic stock sound effects. And to show they hadn't quite figured out how to present the two screens. Now, New Super Mario Bros. This game was a big deal, and it's easy to forget how or why, especially in a world where Super Mario Bros. Wonder is coming out, and it's September 3rd as I'm filming this. Super Mario Wonder comes out on the 20th of next month in October, and Super Mario Wonder is really the first revamp, the first new concept for what 2D Mario can be since New Super Mario Bros. Was first revealed in 2004, launched in 2006. But at the time, there was a point where people talked about 2D Mario in the past tense. There was a long time where people really didn't think that Nintendo would ever go back to doing a 2D Mario game. So it really was a big deal that Nintendo was like, hey, not every game on DS needs to use the two screens in a really crazy, unique way. And hey, we're considering doing a 2D Mario platformer. They were very clear that these were all just demos, especially at this early form. But the idea that a new 2D Mario game could be on the way, arguably for the first time since Super Mario World, was a big deal. Of course, there was the Super Mario Land 1 and 2 on Game Boy. There's Super Mario Land 2 on Game Boy after Super Mario World. Yoshi's Island was technically Super Mario World 2 and was subtitled that. It was developed as the sequel to Super Mario World, but it was also really the first game in the Yoshi series. So really the first proper 2D Mario game, arguably since Super Mario World. Now, WarioWare was one of my favorite GBA games. I was very excited about this DS game, but you notice they show a mouse cursor to represent where the touchscreen would be making contact at. Very simple, bare bones music and effects here. Like, very, very rudimentary. And a lot of these micro games did make it into the final version, I believe. Like this game right here. Yeah, like such little personality. It's so odd. Now, Metroid Prime Hunters, this was exciting. Now, apparently at this point, Nintendo Software Technologies, NST, was actually considering making this a proper Metroid Prime game in the sense of having a really fleshed out single-player campaign, but the response to the multiplayer here was so strong that they decided to focus more on the multiplayer and make it more of an arena shooter for when the game finally came out in 2006. Now, a demo of this game did come out with the Nintendo DS. And now, Animal Crossing DS, this was at a point... This would have been really this... for North American gamers, this would have been the Animal Crossing on DS was the second Animal Crossing game to come out. Animal Crossing was not a blockbuster Nintendo game at the time. It was kind of a niche thing. It was kind of a side thing Nintendo did. It was not a major system seller in a way that really would kind of begin with, arguably with the DS1, but especially with the Animal Crossing game that they put on the 3DS, was when Animal Crossing really started to blow up. And PictoChat was something they ended up bundling with the Nintendo DS, accessible from the main menu. And of course, we made fun of that poor Hero of Time person on the Nintendo Insider forums. Like how could you have instant messaging on the DS? Where would the keyboard be? You just have to pick it out with a D-pad and a couple of buttons. What kind of sense does that make? And then also at the same time saying, why would you need a touchscreen? What would be the use of that? So not saying that's all right. So so this is the end of the video. So going back to our text here. So we have the press conference. And so here I'll have links to all these different sources, old IGN articles, and other similar sources that still exist from back then. But some quotes, mostly skeptical ones, because they're just sort of fun to sort of go back and, the DS was successful. But yeah, this is a bit more balanced. But here's a quote from IGN. Some quotes from IGN here. With the Nintendo DS, I could smell something good in the kitchen. But with the PlayStation Portable, I can taste it. That's some good writing right there, actually. Even though, I may have disagreed with the sentiment, but that's some good writing right there. This is the portable system that gamers have been waiting for all along. Ever since the PlayStation burst on the scene, I don't need these headphones anymore now that we're done with the video section. Ever since the PlayStation burst on the scene and pushed the business to where it is now, the console biz is reaching a saturation point, and PSP would be a great overflow for talented works to get their due. DS will be quite cool and quite different, but Nintendo's approach doesn't seem to have the oomph to push gamers to it, whereas Sony is sitting at the wheel of a bulldozer. Yeah, so not totally negative on DS, but saying hey, the PSP is clearly gonna take the lead in this coming generation. But here we go. And more quotes. I think Sony will support it a lot longer than Nintendo will support the DS, and have a much stronger second generation of software than the DS's second and third combined. No. And next quote. I picked the PSP simply because I know what I'm gonna get from it. I mean, it's hard to I sympathize with that, because there's no guarantee that the DS was going to stick around and really be a long-lasting concept. It could have been the Wii U. Not necessarily the next Virtual Boy, but it could have been the next Wii U, where they're years into the Wii U's lifespan and struggling to validate the case use for the gamepad. But I know what I'm going to get from it. I'm not expecting a gameplay revolution, but I already know it's going to be a pocket PS2. The DS is still a mystery to me. Do I want dual screens? Are the games using the touchscreen something I'm personally going to enjoy? I don't know. The next quote. 2 screens is nifty, but I'm more excited about the possibility of listening to some tunes or watching a movie on my gaming device. We have the next quote here. This one was from a forum somewhere. PSP versus DS is going to be the new analogy of choice for demonstrating Nintendo incompetence. And here we have Nintendo DS versus PSP. This was from IGN around E3 2004. And this is a quote from Mark Nix. The PlayStation Portable is the handheld system that pocket gamers have been waiting years for. After years of the Game Boy racking up impressive sales but garnering no credit in the straight world of gaming fans, this is a system so powerful it cannot be denied. People who know me from my many, many years interning for IGN Pocket, amongst other sites here, know that I do love my Game Boy. But the PSP is portable gaming on the next level. That mass market, everybody must play, super cool, even to chicks game system experience that we're hoping the GBA would have been when we saw those amazing shots of games like the Game Boy Advance Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Unless something catastrophic happens between the hands-on experience with the temp hardware that we had at E3 and the final hardware, with games fully playable on battery off the UMD sometime before 2005, then PlayStation Portable is, to put it bluntly, the real deal. Okay, and there's the magazine cover I showed up before. Now, sometime, this was August. I want to say it was late August. Nintendo DS got a redesign from the prototype I have on my shirt to the final version we have on the right. Now, compared to the PSP, the launch model DS really paled in comparison in terms of cool factor. And I mean, I say this having owned both systems at the time. DS paled in comparison in terms of cool, chic factor to the PSP. But it wasn't a total blowout like the prototype DS compared to the PSP. Now, one thing I think is interesting is that I had a friend, really close friend, he watches my Twitch stream sometimes. He was more team PSP, right? And when I showed him the redesigned DS, as we were calling it at the time, he was saying like, hey, Nintendo kind of took a lot of they kind of ripped off the PSP to make the DS look cooler. And I'm like, I don't really see it. I don't see how that is a ripoff of the PSP. Now, if Nintendo went from the prototype DS to straight to the Nintendo DS Lite and made the signature color of the DS Lite black, then it's like, yeah, you really are chasing the tail of the PSP with that. But at the time, I'm like, man, they made the DS look even... I was happy with this compared to the more toy-like Game Boy Advance original model, which I now love as, nostalgic. But yeah, the DS, they made it look even cooler. It's not going to be a total blowout compared to the PSP, and I was not anti-PSP. I just did not want the PSP to just blow the DS out the water and ruin Nintendo's portable business. And here we have this is from EGM. Yeah, this is EGM's coverage of the DS redesign pre-launch. And at this point, Nintendo confirmed that the final name of the system would be Nintendo DS. Nintendo had the Nitro codename as the internal codename. That's why the Nintendo DS family, their model number is NTR with for instance, let's see here. Okay, not this. This is the DSi XL is UTL, but the Nintendo DS was NTR for Nitro, and the public code name was DS. And they said that was going to be a temporary name. It'll come to the market with a new name, and I was excited about the PSP as well. But I was like, hey, to have PS2 graphics on a system that small, a lot of people, it was common knowledge. As much as people would say, hey, PSP is going to blow out the DS, but the DS might have hope because PSP is going to be $350 minimum, possibly even $400, to have graphics that good on a system that small. But yeah, compared to now, this is I think not quite the final dimensions. The final dimensions were the edges weren't quite so sharp on the what actually launched. But this is the general gist of the redesign. And at the time, this was seen as a really sleek thing, a really needed redesign for the DS compared to what actually came out. Now, I'm going to get into more EGM coverage, but like I was saying, it's like, yeah, PSP, it was the favorite, but DS, and especially with things like, PSP, this is going to be PlayStation versus Nintendo 64 all over again, because PlayStation is moving to the future, having optical discs with much bigger storage. Nintendo's stuck in the past using obsolete cartridge tech. It doesn't look good for Nintendo. And of course, the technological landscape changed so much that by the time it was ready for a PSP successor, they were using the same obsolete cartridge tech that the DS used, but because using optical discs at that point seemed kind of ridiculous. Even though UMD discs, those little things were cool to have around, cool to pop into the system. The load times weren't so cool, but I stand by the PSP, and I'm glad it had a long life, a long successful life. I wish the Vita had as much of a chance to be successful, but Sony kind of gave up on it before it even came out. But so here we go. But yeah, but the hope for Nintendo DS to even have a chance was that everyone's expecting PSP to be like 350, 400 or more. And hey, and at this point the DS was confirmed a little later. I think it was September 21st, I think. No, it was like August 21st, something like that. Nintendo DS was announced to be 150 and come with a Metroid Prime Hunters demo cartridge. So when PSP was announced to launch at $200, look at this. EGM is depicting this as an atomic bomb. PSP 200 on the side of an atomic bomb with little graffiti to Nintendo with love scratched on the side. That's how big a deal. It's like, heck, like DS is going to be 150, but the PSP is going to be 200? Like, for only $50 more, people are getting a system that's so much more powerful, so much better tech, so much better graphics. Nintendo's main advantage they have is eroded. People are like, why would anyone get the DS at this point, except for Nintendo fanboys, when for $50 more they can get the PSP. A lot of people, there were a lot of pundits that were like, hey, and now here we go, Michael Pachter. And now Michael Pachter, I don't know, he made a lot of wrong predictions, but he seems to have right about a lot of things as well. Being half right half the time, he's just there to give his commentary. But anyway, is DS in trouble? Even with PlayStation Portable ringing up at under 200, analyst Michael Pachter isn't worried about Nintendo's new release dual-screen system and its chances for success. Quote, sure, PSP is in a much better position to compete with DS, and I believe Sony and Nintendo are targeting different consumers with their products. PSP will attract the 17 and older crowd, while DS will skew younger. So, in Nintendo's favor, he's saying, hey, PSP, they're going to skew 17 and up. DS is going to be more for the kids market. And that's what Sony was saying, like, hey, DS, it's just a toy. It's for kids. PSP, if you're a serious gamer, if you're not a little kid, you're going to want the PSP. Meanwhile, DS found great success not just with kids, with, the 18 to 25, market, as a lot of those gamers who grew up with Game Boy Advance happen to be aging out of high school, moving into the adult world like I was at the time. But then also successful with the older, 30 plus adults who were not in the traditional gaming market. Nintendo DS had massive success with. So here on Nintendo World Report, we've got a sort of a chat that goes on about discussing the price comparison of PSP compared to DS. We have Jonathan Metz, Mike Skelms, Michael Cole, and Dragonora. So we have all these just that's real Aerith and Bob kind of thing, where it's like all these normal, guy off the street kind of names, then Dragonara. So I'll read through this. And Dragonara is the one that's really more cheering for the PSP. Now, this is abridged. I pre-abridged this. Wherever there's an ellipsis is like a cut. I'll have a link to the full-length chat there. But Jonathan, PSP is still months away in the US. The DS will have a head start here in America, but in Japan they're releasing about a week apart, only $50 price difference, Mike says. The PSP is looking very attractive at $200, Michael. I have to agree with Dragonara. $200 versus $150 isn't a big difference if you would rather have more powerful graphics. Dragonara. Metal Gear Acid, anyone? Hello? Now, it's kind of funny because Metal Gear Acid was really being hyped up on the graphics alone. Like, wow, this looks about as good as Metal Gear Solid 2 on PS2. But the gameplay, it's a card game. It's it couldn't be more different. So a lot of people, in support of PSP, are really hyping Metal Gear Acid, even though they would not like the game itself when it came out. But anyway, Dragonora, Kutaragi is already calling it, meaning the DS, the Pikachu console. And Kutaragi and Kasurai, they would go with DS versus PSP versus DS, really dismissing it. Oh, it's the kid system. It's not serious, a serious system. It's a babysitting tool. They said with DS versus Vita, really making even DS versus PSP as well as Vita versus 3DS, really dismissive, derisive comments about the DS. Like I said, Sony at Game Developer Console 5 is saying PSP will elevate handheld gaming out of the portable gaming ghetto, and Sony is the only one that has the power to do this. Mike Skellin saying, but yeah, Kutaragi is also calling his system the Gran Turismo console. Dragonara, indeed, which will sell to older gamers, not Pikachu. I mean, even at the that's kind of Pokemon is probably bigger with adults even by then than with actual kids. And the idea that E-rated games don't sell to people over 18 is kind of absurd. So yeah, it's just kind of false logic there. But which indeed will sell to older games, not Pikachu. Bloodworth. I still think the similarity to PS2 is more of a negative than a positive. I wouldn't say that myself. Interesting take there. Mike, Nintendo brings something unique to the handheld market. Mike Skellins, and whereas Sony is bringing down watered PS2 games. Ouch, that's pretty harsh actually. I wouldn't say that. Dragonara, it's possible, Dragonara, but remember the N64? Originally $250 USD, dropped a mere fortnight to $200 right before launch. And Jonathan Metz is saying, in terms of the mainstream demand at this price gap, I think PSP is going to murder the DS. And that's what you heard a lot of at the time. And Juan Schwartz, the PSP price may seem attractive, but what of battery life? 4 to 6 hours? That's running minimum volume and screen power is pretty sad. Dragonor is saying, doesn't matter what Nintendo's doing to innovate. People want PS2 graphics said and done. Now we're skipping ahead. Mike says, if people want good graphics, why has every other handheld failed? And Michael Cole is saying, this is true. Sony's stereotypical user base, at least in the US, really isn't interested in handheld gaming and has nothing to do with game content on handhelds. Bloodworth is saying, I'm not entirely convinced the PS2 audience wants a handheld. Mike Skellin says, they've all looked better than GBA or GB. Dragonor is saying to the comment about, the murder is an understatement what the PSP is going to do to DS. Blood was saying, and go back to their console. So this is a chat where people are sort of talking over each other a bit. But Jonathan Metz saying, Game Boy definitely defeated more powerful systems, but those competitors were introduced after Game Boys well established, and they all sold for much higher prices. Dragonor is saying, it's not AA's anymore, it's rechargeable. That makes a huge difference. I really never had any problems with the PSP's battery life, me personally, but Dragonor is saying, if Sony's battery spec are up to par, expect no more than 2 to 3 hours. Mike Skellin saying, DS doesn't need to be established. The Nintendo handheld name is established, and that's all it needs. Dragonor is saying, always have Sony's estimates when it comes to battery life. Always. So even, being total chest pump Team PSP is like, hey, be skeptical with whatever Sony says about the battery life. Malcolm Cole says, don't forget about rumored power consumption requirements on games. Skipping ahead. Jonathan Metz says, DS will not be able to establish itself strongly by March. Not enough to compete with a much more powerful PSP at a similar price. That was completely wrong. Dragonor is saying, I agree with Johnny. Nintendo needs to slash that price now. Yeah, right. Blood was saying, I don't think the graphic difference is enough of a hurdle if there's a significant number of 3D games on DS. Now, because the idea of polygonal 3D games on handles is such a new thing, people were really excited about that for both DS and PSP, but when it came to DS, I'm just thinking off, just casual, I'm thinking Mario 64 DS, Rayman DS, Metroid Prime Hunters. There were those Call of Duty first-person shooter ports. There were the Kingdom Hearts games, there was not much of an emphasis on polygonal 3D games on the DS. And I think that had a lot to do with the fact that DS not have analog. Michael Cole says, if the PSP fails, it will be due to its library and battery life. Nintendo's $50 advantage is not an advantage. Dragonor saying, it's a huge hurdle. Huge. Mike Skellin says, Nintendo doesn't need to slash their US price, not until January. Man, even him saying they don't need to slash their price till January. This thing is launching in late November 2004, the DS. So they're saying, Nintendo doesn't need to slash their price until early in 2005, just not even 4 months into the system's lifespan. That would have pissed a lot of people off. And, here we go. Skipping ahead, Jonathan Metz. In America, Nintendo could wait till March or so, but then they'll probably piss off a lot of people who bought it just a couple months earlier, which is the point I was making, skipping ahead. I'm not going to sit here and say I hate the PSP. I'm going to get one at the launch, just like I did. But I'm tempted to import a Japanese one. I don't trust Sony on their region locks, though, even though they say they aren't any. Michael Cole says, yes, it will be the game price point that might scare away consumers then. Mike Skellin says, but most people don't buy more than one portable. Dragonor says, if Nintendo doesn't act accordingly, we'll just tie up exclusives now like Castlevania, which might seep onto PSP instead and slash the price. Sony will own the handheld market in no more than 10 years. Nintendo, Castlevania ended up making appearances on both PSP and DS, but it really took the DS Castlevania games really did take the forefront, following the style of the of Symphony of the Night. Dragonor is saying probably less. Michael Cole saying, after all, handheld games have always been thought of as lesser purchases. Dragonor is saying, if Nintendo truly believes that PSP is not a gaming machine, then they're sticking their heads in the sand. Mike Skellin says, Nintendo has a good advantage on game price and a slight advantage on system price. Dragonor says, this is not a good thing. And it's not an advantage at all with the graphical capabilities. Not at all. It's a burden. And Brotherwood says, I think the price pretty much levels the playing field. Mike Skellin says, people don't want to pay $50 for a handheld game. Dragonor says, software prices, I will agree with you that on. Mike says, they just don't. You're right on the system price, Dragonor. The system price will drive game sales, Blood was saying. It's going to come down to what kind of experience people are more interested in. I think he nailed it right there. Jeff Shirley says, I remember people whining about $40 GBA games. Now, GBA's standard games were $30. Games such as games like Dr. Mario Puzzle League, games such as the NES Classic series, those were released at $20. But Jeff Shirley is saying, I remember when people were whining about $40 GBA games. Michael Cole, I don't think the average handheld gamer will see better graphics at $20 extra as a plus. Dragonor, to be fair, they were GBA games. These are nigh PS2 level games now. I doubt that. Michael Cole says, of course, the average handheld gamer is currently a GBA owner. If Sony can get its user base to purchase their handheld, then it's a different story. Dragonor, Sony are the kings of marketing. Let me repeat this. Now, skipping ahead, here's the deal. People do care about graphics, Jonathan Metz says, and if Sony is smart, they'll run ads with DS footage next to PSP footage. The difference is huge, and Nintendo can't upgrade their system's capabilities. It's far too late for that. The only response they have hardware-wise is to cut the price so it aligns with people's expectation of the relative hardware power next to PSP. So Jonathan Metz is really not confident in... as DS versus PSP, it was the same thing as Game Gear versus Game Boy. Same thing as Neo Geo Pocket Color versus the Game Boy Color, where it's people did not care. People cared more about the game availability and the nature of the games than just comparing the footage. I mean, comparing the graphics straight up next to each other. And Dragonor is saying, I can see lots of games that are currently TBA being canceled and moved to PSP. So Dragonor is predicting lots of DS games are going to be canceled and moved to PSP. Bloodworth is saying, I don't think DS games can go to PSP. Mike Skellin says, Nintendo also needs to heavily play up the DS's features, Dragonora. Developers have already commented that they want to make games for PSP now the price is so low. Mike Skellin says, communication, touch, dual screens, microphone, wireless. Jonathan Metz says, DS could easily fall victim to ugly versions of PSP games with a map on one screen. Really, fruit fly in here. Really not a problem that the system had. Chris Batea says, well, in America where power and graphics are key to selling hardware, it would be an effective campaign, Johnny. Dragonor says, I said cancel and then move. Michael Cole says, well, the types of games Nintendo hopes to have on DS will inherently be exclusive to the touchscreen or dual screens, I suppose. And skipping ahead, Mike Skellin says, I fully believe Nintendo will be able to rack up in the 7 to 16-year-old market. The communication features will definitely appeal to that crowd. And Dragonor is saying, see, Metal Gear Solid, Devil May Cry, etc. Mike Skellin says, but the 17-plus market, which was looking solid until this PSP price, is going to be tougher than expected. Dragonor is saying, so much for breaking into the older gamer demographics. They're saying that, like, hey, this is going to be a kids-only system. They're not going to be able to break into the older market that's locked down by PSP due to only being $50 more. But Mike's saying, the thing about DS, though, is that in the beginning, people will be willing to play a game that's not as big simply because they'll be able to play it differently. Jumping ahead, Michael Cole doesn't have built-in chat program, though. Dragonor, people don't want unique, though. That's the problem. They want mass-market items. And boy, DS was as mass-market as it got, as it turned out. But people say, like, hey, 2 screens, non-standard, touchscreen, non-standard, microphone, non-standard. This is the freak. This is the exception. This is not what the mass market is going to go for because this isn't standard. Nintendo made it standard. But all right, so skipping ahead a little bit. I've heard the PSP's wireless tech is somewhat behind the DS's, though. I've never heard that before, as Bloodworth's saying. I think they were both pretty... I think they both had dual wireless standards. One for local ad hoc wireless play and like locally, and one for 802.11 for your online connectivity. But Michael Cole is saying, and you think casuals are actually interested in playing handheld gaming if it's pretty enough, Dragonora? That's what I'm not sure about. Jonathan Metz saying, this battle will be fought on playgrounds and school cafeterias and in mall game stores. Jonathan called it there, but Jonathan Metz saying, it's all about hype. PSP is engineered from hype from the ground up. Mike Skellin says, Sony's plan is to make them interested. And Mike says, with a sexy design. And Bloodwood says, I don't believe you'll be playing PSP games with one copy. I think they did have that capability, actually. Dragonor is saying, it has the same protocol it's like in the Nintendo proprietary version. Mike Skellins is saying, people were interested in digital music players, but iPod is a totally different beast. iPod isn't just a music player. Mike Cole is saying, he's not talking about the transfer rate, Dragonora. Mike Skellins is saying, it's a fashion accessory, a cultural icon of the iPod. Dragonora, Nintendo cannot hype for anything compared to Sony. He said something stronger than, anything, but Dragonora at all. And Mike Skellin saying Sony is aiming dead on for the iPod image. Now here's some I inserted these. These are some publicity photos of photo shoots Sony did with those 18 to 25-year-old adults, fashionably dressed, models using PSP out in public, and that iPod chic is what they're going for with this. They really did want PSP to be the next generation Walkman. But Dragonor is saying, I think they'll get it too with that price. Mike Scones, me too. Nintendo couldn't design a hip, sexy product no matter how hard they tried. Hey, they look the freaking SP was already out. This thing is cool. And now some colors, not so much as others, but this black SP, this thing is cool. The Game Boy Micro, that thing is cool. The DS Lite, that thing is really cool. All right, I don't want to hear that. All right, I don't want to hear that. Okay, but anyway, Dragonor, the DS design is fine. Huh? No, this is Dragonor saying this. The PSP design is fine. It looks better than the PSP. And Mike's kind of saying the DS design is fine. The PSP design is doggone sexy. Dragonor is saying that. Well, it's interesting for all. Dragonor was so team PSP, except for the look of the console. Here Dragonor is saying that the PSP is ugly. I think the PSP was a beautiful piece of hardware. Dragonor is skipping ahead saying the PSP is a horrible looking in terms of pure design. And Mike Skell's saying most people would not agree with you. Hey, the guy wearing the DS prototype shirt says that the PSP is a gorgeous piece of hardware design. And Mike Skell's said, I'd say more people like the design on the PSP than the DS. Dragonor is saying they have no taste. Like who? It's like Dragonor's been possessed all of a sudden by someone else. Mike Skell's saying most people will be indifferent on the DS design. Dragonor, I don't like the DS design, no, but it isn't ugly to most people. And ultimately, it's interesting that they think that the PSP, the DS looks better than the PSP. I'd say that the PSP looked better as a piece of hardware. DS Lite was more of a fair comparison, but people ultimately cared more about the games and the functionality of the hardware than how cool they looked. Chris saying the PSP is not ergonomic, but it's got the sleek, reflective black glass look going for it. Mike Skellin says the DS design doesn't evoke anything. Mike Skellin says the PSP design evokes a sleek system that is very hip looking. Dragonor says it's just meh, but meh is better than an ugly raindrop thing. Chris Bethea says the DS is rather lackluster and is silver, not even polished metal, but silver plastic. Yeah, no, it's exactly. Bloodworth, the PSP is metal. I doubt it. Chris Bethea, no, it's plastic. It just looks metal. Bloodworth, lots of things look metal. Now the Game Boy Micro, that was metal. Bloodworth, Chris Bethea, but it is shiny. The DS looks like painted plastic, not as attractive as an icon. Now, hey, one of the reasons I wanted the black Game Boy SP, because this is made of black plastic. Whereas the Platinum systems, including the original model DS, that is not silver, that is not platinum or silver colored plastic. That is opaque, generic plastic that is then painted silver. So when you get scratches on it, it looks ugly, it looks terrible. Whereas this has some scratches on the lid, but it looks great because the plastic, the coloration is imbued within the plastic. I haven't touched this thing. I had to go several states to my storage unit where I used to live, several states away, to get my DS shirt and my my SP out of storage for the purposes of this. And I hadn't touched my Game Boy SP in years. I'm like, man, I forgot how cool this thing was. And Jonathan Metz saying, well, I think we should wrap this up. Dragonor says, Gwarg. Jonathan Metz saying, I think it's obvious we have a system war on our hands. John Metz, it'll be fun to watch. Dragonor, massacre more like it if Nintendo doesn't act. Mike Scones, even if you can't compare them, it's still a war. Dragonor saying, I don't know if it'll be fun for Nintendo fans. Well, it ended up being fun for everyone, because as they say, as stone sharpens stone, so does one man sharpen another. The PSP and DS, two higher performance handhelds than anything had been under the market. Two totally different concepts of what a handheld gaming system in the 21st century would be. And they both complemented each other fantastically. I think that was one of those cases like Super Nintendo versus Genesis where they both coexisted and did everything they could to outclass each other. And I think anyone who was a handheld gamer at that time had a much better experience than if PSP had only existed and no DS, or if DS had existed and no PSP. Both, whichever system you had, I had both for a while. I ended up selling I mean, I didn't have much money. I was, in college, and they didn't announce Parappa the Rapper and Katamari Damacy soon enough for a PSP, so I ended up selling it. And then I regretted it once those two games got announced. But here is from I'll have a link, an article called "Nintendo is Doomed." You have there's a few interesting quotes. The source for they link to a lot of these original sources I've been quoting, but now here's a quote from John Nickerson in the comments section of that article. This is 2014. They wrote this. I remember the summer after the DS launched. I was in a GameStop looking at some games, and the clerk decided for whatever reason to rag on the handheld, telling me that he heard it was about to be discontinued and the PSP offered a far better experience. Needless to say, I did not buy anything from the store that day. Yeah, lots of comments about GameStop employees being fanboys and even mocking customers for their game choices or console choices were really rampant at that time. Not so much nowadays, but a lot back then. I know one day, my story is something similar. This is sometime in 2005. I walked into a GameStop, and it was a pretty new GameStop in a strip mall. And I was just checking it out, and there were two GameStop employees, and they were standing near the DS section. They were just putting up games, and one of the guys was saying, man, we need to get rid of all this DS crap and put out more UMD movies and expand the PSP section with more UMD movies. And the other guy's like, man, no one's gonna care. No one cares about UMD movies. But the other guy's like, hey, the DS is not sticking around. It's clearly all belongs to the PSP. And this is more, yeah, that's a cue right there to remind me about that story. So even on a quick story, I'll tell you, I think it was Jeff Keighley. And I forgot who it was. It was whoever was on Nintendo's. They ended up being at E3 2005 on Nintendo's stage demoing Nintendogs during Nintendo's E3 presentation 2005. But they were having an argument on G4TV.com. Jeff Keighley and I forgot who she was. It wasn't Olivia Munn. I forgot her name. But they were arguing over which was a better system. And what Jeff Keighley was saying. And basically, Jeff Keighley's argument was the DS is successful now. It doesn't long term. The PSP is going to dominate. And her counter argument was the DS is outsold the PSP. It's outselling it in Japan and the US. And Jeff Keighley's argument was, well, that's not fair because the DS came out first, and it's not even out in Europe yet. And I don't think she said that but my argument was, hey, no one said, hey, it's not fair to say that PSP. And it's not fair to say PS2 outsold GameCube and Xbox because they came out a year earlier. They got to the market first and had that advantage. Nintendo gets out first in this DS versus PSP situation where a lot of people just wrote DS off as just being instant loser. When PSP is actually DS is actually taking the lead over PSP. The argument is, oh well, that's not fair because PSP. DS came out first, so you can't just use that to argue that DS is selling better than it. And there's a lot of really, I guess, disillusion over the fact that DS was actually not only succeeding but outselling the PSP in Japan and North America, and then in Europe. I remember just all the comments oh, it's such a shame that the PSP is getting outsold by the DS. Nintendo doesn't deserve this success. But I have another quote here. Put the PSP next to DS. This is not long after the PSP came out. I think this is from IGN. Put the PSP next to the DS in the eyes of a customer, and you can bury the DS the next day. The DS started off very well, but so did the Dreamcast. The DS IMHO was a knee-jerk reaction to the PSP, and is sloppy all the way down the board. The launch titles between the two systems are night and day. The DS couldn't even sell one-to-one software to hardware. I'm not sure what they mean by that. The DS software was selling great as well as the system. People are not buying DSs. Does it mean that every DS wasn't selling one-to-one for every available game on the DS? That's not a reasonable comparison. But the PSP is over a generation ahead in terms of technology and is going to wipe the floor with DS. I completely respect Nintendo as a software company, but as far as hardware is concerned, they are a sheep lost in the woods, and Sony is coming home to Grandma's house. How's that for mixed literary allusions? The DS will sell decently for 6 to 12 months, but it's so far behind the PSP, customers are going to jump ship. And that was a lot of... And this image here... now, I could not find an unwatermarked version of this, only because I have access to a portable hard drive from back in 2004. This image was going around, was being widely circulated as just... even though, DS is out, PSP is out, and you have 3 people playing the sleek, shiny PSPs with their polygonal 3D games. Now, ironically, the person on the left here is playing, looks like New Rally X on a Namco compilation. But you have Ridge Racer DS, it looks like here, and some other game, I can't tell what it is. And here, meanwhile, here on the DS, we have PictoChat with the handwriting chat on the screens. Anyone up for some Pokemon Dash? Hello? Anyone there, guys? Why is everyone ignoring me? So this cartoon, this setup, this posed photograph was basically reflected the zeitgeist that like DS was not going to last long compared to the PSP. PSP was the obvious favorite to dominate. Fortunately, both systems ended up doing well. DS, it was the one that ended up taking the lead. Now, my launch day DS ended up getting signed by Shigeru Miyamoto. And by the way, if you have those little things from craft stores to display a photo, they're great for displaying portable devices and electronics. So the man himself signed my DS. This is the Nintendo World Store at September 2005. And there's me shaking hands with Shigeru Miyamoto with my Eslo hat that my dear mom crocheted for me. And Bill Trinan. I did not recognize Bill Trinan at the time. I just like, oh my gosh, it's Miyamoto. Like, I can't believe it. So that was now after I got my DS signed by Miyamoto, I did not want to carry it around and use it on a daily basis anymore. So I got a black Nintendo DS. Now this is a Japan only color, but the Nintendo World Store in Rockefeller Center, New York City, did offer a lot of Japanese exclusive colors. They literally took the Japanese DS boxes and just put on American UPC over it. And so, like with my black DS, like with my black DS here, I mean my black SP here, like I wanted the black electronics. I think it was like a little cooler, a little sleeker, matched my PSP better. And I remember, I mean, this is at this point I'm on the school bus, you know, like senior year of high school, like people, you know, some of whom were sort of antagonistic towards me, like, wait, you're still playing DS? Don't you have the PSP? That one's so obviously better. And I was like, oh, like I like both systems, and I was trying to argue the positive points of the DS, like, no way, this thing is not gonna last. This is, you know, senior year of high school. Like, it's obviously all about the PSP. Like DS, it's not gonna last long. And I'll tell you some more stories about that when I get to my game library. And so, for Nintendo's E3 2006, the reveal of the Wii, the full proper reveal of Wii, and for I think 20 maybe 30, I think it was more like 20 people who handed in their Nintendo DS systems that they had on them. Now this was not something they really advertised beforehand. So more people I'm sure would have came with brand new DSs. I had my DS. That was my daily driver black DS at the time, which is a very rare color in North America. If you gave in your Nintendo DS, they would engrave it with this unique E3 2006 engraving, commemorating the day that the Wii was revealed. And, I mean, the reveal of the Wii at the time, to go from Nintendo having to use their E3 presentation to dispel rumors that Nintendo was... By the way, if you're wondering what that sound was, it's this little, like, stem toy rainbow slug thing. Excuse me, I'm trying to be quiet with it. But... yeah, Nintendo was going from dispelling rumors that the GameCube was about to be discontinued, that they were leaving the game hardware market, to E3 2006, where they basically set the groundwork for their most successful system yet. And like if you were at being at Nintendo World on the 5th of May, the 9th of May 2006 was like the Woodstock of Nintendo. It was a big deal. It was a memorable deal to sort of have this engraving on a DS. Now, my DS. Now, they accidentally messed up the engraving on mine, and they destroyed my DS. So they replaced it with a brand new DS. So there are only 20 of the E3006 DSs out in the wild. There might be one or two archival within Nintendo. So this is one of the rarest Nintendo DSs. I've been around looking. To my knowledge, I have the only known black example of this Nintendo DS. The only known mint condition example of this Nintendo DS, because, hey, I got they messed up my DS, replaced it with a brand new black one, so I have the only mint condition example of this, the only black example of this. There are only 20 in the world, maybe 21 if there's one in archive at Nintendo. And the DS Lite's about to come out soon, so I just didn't play DS until the DS Lite came out. Now we're getting into my personal experience with the DS library. Now, I remember the day before, the night before, it came out May 21st, 2001. I made a countdown calendar the day they announced when the DS would be coming out. I think it was exactly 60 days or exactly 80 days or something like that. I made a countdown calendar, and actually when I was going through to get my Game Boy Advance and all that, and my E3 DS shirt from 2004, I found in a folder my countdown calendar when I scratched off each day until the DS came out. I made like an advent calendar for myself, which I will edit in here. I forgot to edit this in advance, so I will put that in. Now, what we've got here, me and my friend, my dear friend, we slept over at my house. He slept over at my house, and we watched like the first one, a DVD, and I still have this DVD set, the first 100 Strong Bad emails. We ordered pizza, played Game Boy Advance, multiplayer all night, and watched Strong Bad emails on Marathon, and ate pizza. And then the next morning, got Mom to take us out, because, we're like 17, 18 or whatever, I don't know. But we take us out to the GameSpot where we have our DSs reserved. The GameStop, not GameSpot. We have our DSs reserved, picked them up, took them home, and the first thing we played, the Metroid Prime Hunters First Hunt pack-in demo. I remember the last pep rally of high school. Me and my friends, that was kind of funny. It was like something from a sitcom, because a few of our friends in our nerdy clique, they basically hijacked the TV from the AV room and went to like a janitor's supply closet and snuck in a GameCube and were playing 4-player Smash Brothers in a supply closet, and they ended up like getting caught and getting busted. Meanwhile, now I don't know why people in high school, they hated pep rallies. And you didn't just hate pep rallies, you wanted to be seen hating pep rallies. I didn't care so much. I just messed around with my friends. We're playing 4-player Mario Brothers with link cables, sitting in the back in the gym, so like the teachers can't see us or anything. But the last pep rally of all, we're sitting in the back playing Metroid Prime Hunters First Hunt, playing in a wireless 3D first-person arena shooter. Like stealthily. It was so cool. We played Mario 64 DS. Now, mind you, Mario 64 was only like 7 or 8 years old at this point. So it was the effect of a fully 3D platformer on a handheld was just a mind-blowing thing. And so, this is one of the few games that used, to counteract the fact that the Nintendo DS did not have an analog stick. They had this a wrist strap that came with it that had a little pad, and you're supposed to put your thumb on this pad and tighten it. So you had this hard plastic pad on the pad of your thumb that you would slide on the touchscreen to simulate analog control. Now, at the time I was playing this, I actually played through the entire game like that pretty much fine. But even just a couple of years later, going back to it, I'm like, I was blessed by some angel that gave me the unique skill to play with the thumb pad like that. Nowadays, I haven't tried playing it like this in over a decade, but I haven't plugged the game in over a decade. I'll be playing it on Twitch someday, using the Wii U Virtual Console. But playing this with the slide pad, even just a couple years later, did not work. The only other game I know of that actually went out of their way to use this was Rayman DS. Very not much of an emphasis on platformers. Now, these are all going to be DS games that I owned at the time, or games that I think were worth commenting on in my experience. Now, Spider-Man 2, this was mostly a 2D game. This was probably the first launch-itis game, as Pete Dorr puts it. A game I got just because it was there at DS launch. I really wasn't that into it. I only think I played it once. I ended up selling it. Now, Ridge Racer DS, I never played it, but it was kind of cool to have something to directly contrast to the Ridge Racer game that was on PSP. Now, there was this infamous video that was going around, and this is like Google Video Days, pre-YouTube, where there was this problem with certain PSPs where earlier on, if you held them a certain way, the UMD disc would just come spitting out of the console and the system would freeze. Now, the game that was being used to demonstrate this was Ridge Racer on PSP. Someone, as a joke, replicated the effect with the DS cartridge spitting out of the DS. but I never played the game myself. Now, WarioWare Touched. This was a game that just came out. So that's the games I had at launch into now this is the first 2005 title. This came out February 14th. WarioWare Touch was one of the games I was really excited to play. One of the games that really made lots of great use of the dual screens, the touch screen. You know what? A game I forgot. A game I forgot is a very important game that I got at launch is Feel the Magic XYXX, which was a minigame compilation with this really unique art style, sort of silhouette art style. That was really all about you're a guy trying to court this girl and get her attention, but it's not like it's really played goofy, like you're doing all kinds of goofy stunts to try to get her attention. It's not really like a dating sim. It's really just more lighthearted, the misadventures of this guy trying to do favors for this girl or do impressive things to get her attention. But WarioWare Touched was playing the second. I think the WarioWare Twisted already came out in Japan for the Game Boy Advance at this point. But in North America, this is the second WarioWare game to come out, and it was a really fantastic use of the touchscreen. This is the game that I played that I was like, this is what DS was made for. This is like, I just remember the whole time playing from between E3 and the DS coming out. There's that long wait. I used to watch Nintendo's E3 2004 presentation almost daily. Trying to imagine what playing with two screens would be like. And, that's early that summer, I actually lost the first death of a pet in my life. So the build up for DS was a really nice waiting period, really nice to sort of get my spirits up dealing with my first death of a pet. Now, when I got this game the day it came out from Best Buy, and the cashier actually said you got that DS thing, do you like it? I was like, oh yeah, I love it. It's like, oh, I heard a lot of people really didn't like it much, and I heard they're gonna stop making it soon. So even by February, lots of just cashiers, this word of mouth, somehow getting this negative word of mouth, rumors that it's gonna be discontinued. I remember saying specifically I remember hearing the DS that it was kind of weird and people really weren't enjoying it much. I was like, no, I enjoyed it a lot. Now, Pokemon Dash, this is the game from the PSP versus DS meme up there. This is not a game I cared about or purchased. Now, one thing interesting I noticed was just that the Meowth on the mouth-shaped balloon sort of tying into the anime a bit there. Now, this is long before Pokemon Diamond and Pearl came out, so we're having our Gen 3 era starters featured prominently here. Now, a prominent illustration credit by Ken Sugimori is interesting on this box art, but I never played this, didn't catch my interest. Yoshi Touch and Go. There was, something they called Balloon Trip at E3 2004. That was a demo that was expanded into this game. I never actually played it, but I do have it on the Wii U Virtual Console. But this is one of those games that, how to use the touchscreen for a game, how to use the dual screens. So this is a game I was interested in at E3. I never actually got it when it came out, but now Rayman DS, another game, Rayman. There's this period where Ubisoft loved to port Rayman 2 to as many systems as they could. It's a tradition I wish they had kept up. I'd love to play Rayman 2 on Switch, as well as the original Rayman. But Rayman, this is the only other game I know of, aside from Mario 64 DS, that officially supported the thumb slider thing as a means to control the game. But I did not get it at the time. I did get it on the 3DS when it came out, and I played a couple of hours of it and never really touched it again. But Polarium, this was a puzzle game, a very visually minimalist puzzle game that utilized the dual screens and the touch screen. I had a lot of fun with this. I remember playing this a lot on the bus, but the buses, I had a lot of bus rides in my life at the time, both to and from high school and to elsewhere. And this puzzle game I played a lot. Very visually sparse. One of those games that a lot of people, especially Nintendo fans, got just because DS. Not a whole lot of games at the time. A lot of games I'm mentioning like Zoo Tycoon. I think it was some puzzle game I never touched. But Pac Pix. This is a game I was interested in. We have the Australian version here. Really crappy looking ratings they had at that time. I hope they have improved their rating graphics. But now this was a game that had a demo at E3 2004, and frankly, this is a game that probably nowadays would probably be better suited as a downloadable game, something like the 3DS, which actually supported downloadable games. Downloadable games did come to the DS on the DSi. I have the DSi XL here, but that came a few years down the line. I think in 2008 or something like that. But yeah, you just draw little Pac-Mans. You have to draw them with a certain stroke, and they'd animate and come to life and eat the ghosts. That's about it. Now, Kirby Canvas Curse, this was the next game I actually did buy. This was a platformer that was the first Kirby game I played after Kirby's Dream Land. I rented Kirby 64, then I played Kirby's Adventure on NES. But yeah, a beautiful. I have this game on the Nintendo Switch's DS Virtual Console, where you use the touch screen as you draw a line for Kirby to go along. Now, I was interested in this because I remember my mom talking about something called Winky Dink, this sort of early interactive TV thing where you had like these overlays that went over the TV, where it was like a cartoon character, and it's like, oh, draw a ladder for Winky Dink, and you take your special washable marker and you draw on the overlay, and then you'd walk up the ladder, and it was just something. So this is kind of something that the more high tech version of that. And this is a game I remember playing a lot, during breaks, during the longer lectures. We'd have a mid-lecture break in college. A game I'd play a lot there. Now, Meteos came out, this is June 28th, and Polarium was a couple months, like a month or two earlier. Yeah, Meteos was actually worked on by Masahiro Sakurai. And, great wireless multiplayer. Not that I played it, but this really was the more popular early DS puzzle game compared to Polarium. Polarium was just all by Polarium, polar, black and white. You're switching white to black. Much more colorful, much more visually stimulating puzzle game. Now, Advance Wars Dual Strike, I had not played any Advance Wars games at this point, but this is one of the games I want to point out. It was really obvious, a turn-based tactical strategy game, something that the dual screens and the touchscreen was really, really meant for. Now, Dual Strike, a lot of games, instead of just be calling such and such DS, would have a game called Dual Strike, D and S, or like Dark Stories or something like that. Just have some way to incorporate D and S. Now, Nintendogs, this came out August 22nd. This game was only $20. This was the first sort of Touch Generations type game that they released. This game I got just for the sake of seeing what the fuss was about. And this is a game that a lot of people did really pass off as shovelware, but Nintendo put their AAA level resources into making a really great, virtual pet game. And this was, one of Miyamoto's, personal projects. Now, Pack and Roll, this is another title based on a demo that was at E3 2004, where you had on the touchscreen, you had a giant Pac-Man that you rolled with a touchscreen like a trackball to roll him around a maze. I never bought it. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! This is another game I never got. Now, I was the only friend in my nerd circle who did not, in the GBA era, did not have Yu-Gi-Oh! The Eternal Duelist Soul for Game Boy Advance. I have it now, ironically, but not at the time. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Nightmare Troubadour is one of those games that really was very clearly like, this is what the DS is made for. The idea that you could have your touchscreen manipulation of the cards and placement of your magic and trap cards in the lower screen, while the battlefield and all the progression of the game and the monsters coming to life and attacking and defending happened on the upper screen. So fantastic use of the DS there. Lost in Blue. This is a sequel to a game called Survival Kids for the Game Boy Color. And it's a game I wanted, but I never actually saw it in shelves. It wasn't a very common Game Boy Color game. So the idea that there was going to be a sequel for DS where you use the touchscreen to do things like making a fire bow and things like that was really interesting, but I never actually got this game. Now, here we have, this is mostly in chronological order, but these few games here, we have Trauma Center Under the Knife, a surgery simulator. And we have Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, a lawyer simulator. It's actually a sort of a sequel to a Game Boy Advance game that was only Japan only. And Cooking Mama, this is a little later, a cooking sim. These were the games where you have that early on, particularly this one actually, you have that early sort of backlash I'd see on game forums sometimes, where it's like, oh, come on, we don't want this stuff. But to a certain extent, it got more severe in like the Wii era, where if it was not an RPG or a first-person shooter or an action game or a platformer, like, you got a bit of backlash from people, like, oh, it's just a gimmick game, we don't want this, we want real games. And it's like, what's the point of making the system so different If you're all the games are just going to be of the same styles that we're already used to. Now I've never played Cooking Mama, but I heard this is actually pretty good. Now this game is a bit of a sell, especially traditional gamers. So that IGN.com Best of E3 2006 winner, right on there. And Metroid Prime Pinball looked interesting. This came with a rumble pack that inserted into the GBA slot of the Nintendo DS. Now, one thing that's important to mention, the Nintendo DS, the Game Boy Advance slot on the original model DS, what later became called by fans the DS Fat, which I think Reggie actually even acknowledged once in an interview, that the DS Fat. The fact that the Game Boy Advance cartridge was fully inserted in the system. So you could have your DS game, and you could have something else like Pac-Man from the classic NES series in the system, and I'm like, wow, I have 2 full-fledged games in the same system, and I don't even have to carry around multiple cartridges. That was a cool thing. And then a world before downloadable games and the like, that was a big deal, being able to have 2 games in the same system and not have to carry around extra cards or cartridges. But the Rumble Pack, for when it came time to the DS Lite, the Game Boy Advance cartridges would stick out, about half of the cartridges would stick out of the DS Lite. So things like the Rumble Pack, that was a Game Boy Advance cartridge, things such as the extra RAM I think that the DS browser needed, those were a lot more cumbersome to use on the DS Lite. Now Trace Memory, this is an point-and-click adventure game where your DS was actually, this was called Another Code in Japan and in Europe. This is a point-and-click adventure game that uses a lot of the unique features of the DS in really novel ways. I don't want to spoil any of them. One of the puzzles that uses the nature of the system itself is really infuriating. Now, one cool thing about this is the DS is represented in-game by a device that your main character depicted on the cover uses. In the game world, the DS-like device is called the DTS, Digital Trace System, which is a device that could save and replace human memories, and it was invented to allow people suffering from like post-traumatic stress disorder to recover after having a traumatic experience like a car accident or suffering abuse or surviving going to war. But it was hijacked by an evil organization that's trying to use it to control the masses, and there's a conspiracy where you're trying to find out a murder mystery on this island with an abandoned mansion in it. It came out in September. A really cool game. Only played through it once. If I played through it again, it would probably be mostly fresh on me. But Mario Kart DS. Now there was a lot of tension leading up to the full reveal of Mario Kart DS. I mean, it had been announced at E3 2004 as we saw, but it wouldn't be fully revealed properly till E3 2005, and there was skepticism as if, the DS has Wi-Fi, we're using it for local, but Nintendo made modems for the GameCube, they never used them for anything. So there was this concern that Nintendo still would not get serious about online gaming, that Mario Kart would not ever be online. And there was talk about Warp Pipe, which had a tunneling service for LAN games on GameCube to be able to play those online. Would they be able to do something similar for DS Wi-Fi games? And as recently as March 2005, Satoru Iwata was saying, oh, well, Mario Kart DS, it'll have local wireless, that'll be good enough. But they didn't so he was playing coy, because they did reveal Nintendo Wi-Fi Connection, that Nintendo DS's online service, in conjunction with GameSpy at E3 2005. And this was before Wi-Fi was as common as it is nowadays. I got a router specifically to play Mario Kart DS online. Nintendo had a partnership with McDonald's. There were a handful of McDonald's, and you had to look it up online to see which McDonald's had it, that DS would be able to access McDonald's Wi-Fi wirelessly. And I was in college at this point, but lots of fond memories of coming home from class, playing on the bus. There was a shuttle between my 2 campuses, playing it on the bus, and then playing Wi-Fi at home with a big bowl of Cheese Nips. Rest in peace, Cheese Nips. So much better than Cheez-Its in my opinion, but that's just me. In playing Mario Kart DS. Now this had wireless. It had wireless battle mode, but not Wi-Fi. But to make up for it, you could play this battle mode single player, which was the first for the series. Mario and Luigi Partners in Time. I lost interest in this game about maybe 20% of the way through, 15-20% of the way through. I just kind of lost interest around the Yoshi's Island section. I feel like a lot of the elegance of Mario and the first Mario and Luigi was lost. Now, it made excellent use of, hey, Mario and Luigi were on A and B on the first game, so we have an X and Y button. Let's have Baby Mario and Baby Luigi on the X and Y buttons. So it was good conceptual use, but I think a lot of the elegance and simplicity kind of was lost with the way they approached it. But great use of the dual screens and great use of the 4 face buttons as opposed to the 2 in this game. I do have it on the DS's Wii U Virtual Console, so I will be playing through it someday. Now, Electroplankton. This was a game that came out in January 2004. This is one of those games that came out. This was alongside Nintendo. It was the beginning of Nintendo really experimenting with what a game can be. Experimenting with things that would down the line would be better suited as apps on a tablet or smartphone, or maybe once the DSi. And when DSi came out, they did part out the different portions of Electroplankton. Nintendo knew this wasn't going to be a blockbuster. It was a very limited release. I think you'd either buy it online through either Target or Walmart, and the Nintendo store in New York City was one of the only stores that you could buy it off the shelf. And I got it not too long after my birthday, and I remember spending hours using it to relax on the bus. Electroplankton is really more of a musical creation tool, but it's not even really like a tool like something like Apple's GarageBand or Audacity. It's really more of a musical toy, using the dual screens, the touch screen, the microphone. Really robust, lots of sounds you can make with it, and it's themed around these little electroplankton. So you're dealing in the microscopic world where you could touch, rub, drag these little microscopic creatures that all create different kinds of sound. And it was very relaxing, very soothing. Taking a nap on the bus between my 2 campuses, it was a very relaxing experience. And I'm glad I own this physically. It's probably one of the more expensive DS games these days. Pokemon Troze, a Pokemon puzzle game. I downloaded this. Now you can download demos from like download stations in certain stores like Target and Walmart, where you could temporarily download demos of games to your DS. And I used that to play Pokemon Troze. It was fine. I didn't like it like Pokemon Puzzle League, but this game does have a very unique art style. Almost kind of reminds me of like the Aaron Esurance commercials they had at the time. The Esurance. Tetris DS. The best. This is a 10 out of 10 amazing version of Tetris. As sadly, it'll probably never get re-released again. Its only chance to get re-released was on the Wii U, and Nintendo did not have the rights to publish this again because they're using the Tetris IP. But ingenious integration of lots of classic Nintendo franchises into Tetris, all kinds of cool modes that never appeared in any other version of Tetris. Lots of great Wi-Fi multiplayer modes themed around different games, like the marathon mode was themed around Super Mario Brothers. There was sort of a versus mode themed around Metroid. There was a puzzle mode where you had to do certain things in a certain number of steps that was themed around Yoshi's Island. Not Yoshi's Island, themed after Yoshi's Cookie. So fantastic use of these different Nintendo franchises and a great use of the dual screens. This is something that me and my mom would play a lot because we both got DS Lites the day the system launched. We got them at midnight from the Nintendo World Store. And my mom was in that category of, not typical 18 to 25-year-old male, gamer, the older adults that, were super casual gamers. The kind of, like my mom loves, she loved Tetris on the original Game Boy. We used to play Tetris link cable multiplayer back in the 90s. So being able to play Tetris multiplayer when we were waiting for our food at a restaurant or sitting on the train going to the city together, lots of warm memories of that. Fantastic. And that came out the same day as Metroid Prime Hunters. Now this game, I ended up selling it, unfortunately. But I do have it on the Wii the Wii U's Virtual Console. It was basically tournament shooter Metroid. Now I probably spent more time and have more personal memories playing the demo that came with the DS upon launch than I have with the final game here. But being able to show off like, hey, look, just a 3D first-person shooter I thought the touchscreen controls were fantastic, me personally. But the single player, it's not very impressive. You're fighting the same boss over and over. I remember using this was one of the few Nintendo games to have built-in voice chat when playing multiplayer online. Now, it was only during the lobbies. I don't think they had the bandwidth to handle the actual gameplay. Now, Brain Age came out April 17th along with the Nintendo DS Lite. Me and Mom got copies of Brain Age with our Nintendo DS, with DS Lites, and we used to play. I was playing it. She was super into it with playing with Sudoku especially. And the copies we had were actually surplus copies from Game Developer Conference 2005, where Satoru Iwata gave out copies of Brain Age to everyone in the audience, and they had surplus. They sent them to Nintendo World to give out for the DS Lite launch. Now we've got New Super Mario Brothers. Wait, April? No, okay. Yeah, so this came out April 17th, but May 15th, was the day the DS Lite came out. And much sleeker, nicer system, brighter screens. And at this point, like, one of my original model DSs was signed by Miyamoto, so I don't want to use that one anymore. Then the other one had the unique distinction of being the only mint condition E3 2006 Special Edition DS, so I don't want to use that anymore. It's still, like, safe in the box with the battery removed and everything. So, New Super Mario Brothers. The first, this game is kind of a these games are kind of a punchline at this point, because they made a sequel on Wii, a sequel on DS, a sequel on 3DS. This one on DS, they made a sequel on Wii, a sequel on 3DS, and a sequel on Wii U. The last two came out only within months of each other, and people just got so tired of the same art style, the same aesthetic, same design philosophy being used over and over. And Super Mario Brothers Wonder, which is coming out in about a month, about 2 months from when I'm filming this, in September 3rd, 2022 or 23. People were very frustrated with this series. It kind of became a punchline, but at the time, a new Super Mario Brothers game, a brand new 2D Mario game in the classic style, was a big deal. People were really excited about this, and with the Wii one that came out down the line, it's the first time a proper 2D Mario game had been on a home console since Super Mario World, arguably. Those games were beloved. It's the second two on 3DS and Wii U that kind of people were getting sick of it. It kind of became a joke, like, not so new anymore. But at the time, this game was a huge deal. Now, at the same time, even when I was playing this for the first time, I remember thinking back, like, this feels like a Super Mario Brothers game based on what people's non-gaming parents back in 1991 thought Mario games were like while their kid was playing Super Mario Brothers 3 or Super Mario World in the other room while they were in the kitchen cooking or in the dining room doing paper taxes or whatever. It was kind of a Mario game based on people's stereotypes of what Mario games were like, but never really were, and Nintendo refused to break away from this style until Super Mario Bros. Wonder, which is not out yet. So New Super Mario Brothers, it's kind of a joke nowadays, and people got sick of the sort of generic baseline Mario art style. Now, even at the time, when I first played the game, when I first plugged it into my DS Lite, even at the time, I remember thinking, like, I remember thinking, like, for the first new proper Mario theme since '91, this is not super impressive for a 2D Mario game. So then we have the DS Lite, much sleeker, much even cooler than the DSi. Now, I imported these styluses from Japan by Hori that extended, like the 3DS stylus would later on. So even on the DS Lite, I had those extending styluses. And one of the most important things about the DS Lite was that they made it much more symmetrical and much more friendly to being held vertically like a book. And yes, my mom did play this, like, out in public. No, like, people really forget what a big deal DS was with 35 and older people who were not traditional gamers at the time. But Star Fox Command, I was interested in it, never actually got it. I already used a few ideas from Star Fox 2, which was then unreleased on the Super Nintendo. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team. I was always interested in the Mystery Dungeon series, going back to when I first heard of the Tornaco's Mystery Dungeon, a Japan-only spin-off of the Dragon Warrior games. I felt that the idea of an RPG where you have randomly generated dungeons, so each time it's a new experience, seems kind of like a cool idea. This was the first game, really the only game in the Mystery Dungeon series to really get a lot of traction outside of Japan. It was kind of a bigger deal in Japan, these roguelike, randomly generated dungeon games. And the idea, the concept that you were in a world, a sapient Pokemon in a world of Pokemon living in little, like, sort of rustic villages and going on adventures, it's a really cool idea for the world, but I was not into the gameplay much. Now, a version of this released on Game Boy Advance with basically the same graphics, but without the map screen. That was called Red Rescue Team. And one cool thing about this game is that if you got taken out, if you if you died in a dungeon, you could get a code, and if you give that code to a friend, they could go on a mission on their game, and if they complete that mission, they've rescued you. They give you a code that they give back to you. You put that in your game, and you can continue playing without losing any of your experience or items. So the idea of going into dungeons to rescue other Pokemon even played into the multiplayer aspect. Now this system was done entirely with codes, mind you, not with wireless multiplayer, as far as I'm aware. It came out in September. Now, Mario vs. Donkey Kong 2 March of the Minis. I loved the first Mario vs. Donkey Kong on Game Boy Advance. One of my favorite Game Boy Advance games, one of my top games, 2004, and really a direct sequel to the Donkey Kong game on Game Boy. Which was a Donkey Kong on Game Boy, was a puzzle platformer, where it's like a cross between, it's kind of like a continuation of the arcade original Donkey Kong, but as puzzle platformer stages, where Mario has all kinds of athletic moves and platforming, but you're using it to solve puzzles and catch up with Donkey Kong, who's running off with Pauline. And Mario vs. Donkey Kong on Game Boy Advance is the same thing, but with just 32-bit CGI sort of Donkey Kong Country style graphics. I wanted more. I mean, the DS with two screens, being able to, have the touch screen, the dual screens, it seemed perfect for Mario vs. Donkey Kong. Instead, they it's called March of the Minis, because they placed emphasis on these mini Mario toys that were in the first game, and it sort of became a Lemmings clone at this point. And the rest of the series from this point only became Lemmings clones. And fortunately, I was able to play the demo of this game through one of those DS download stations. But I'm like, I liked Mario vs. Donkey Kong because it was a continuation of the puzzle platformer on the original Game Boy, Donkey Kong 94 as it's often called. Whereas this is just Lemmings with toy Mario characters. And that's what the rest of the series became from that point onward. And I liken it to if the first Mario Kart on Super Nintendo was, it's a kart racing game. Then what if Mario Kart 64 was a tactical tank game with Mario characters? And I'm like, okay, it's a bit of something new, something different. But I hope they get back to the kart racing, which is what Mario Kart was all about. No, all Mario Kart games from now onward are going to be tactical tank games. And that's what this was like when Mario vs. Donkey Kong went from being a puzzle platformer continuation of the Game Boy game from 94 to being Lemmings clones with toy Marios. So, Clubhouse games, I was very interested in it, never got to actually play it. Now, my mom has Nintendo Switch, and we play lots of Switch. We play the Clubhouse games like 52 Worldwide Classic or something like that on Switch, but we never got it on DS, which is such a shame, because I think we would have been totally into it. Yoshi's Island DS. This was announced E3 2006 as Yoshi's Island 2, and I loved Yoshi's Island on Super Nintendo. I'm glad they called it Yoshi's Island DS and not Yoshi's Island 2. On one hand, it makes it sound like it's just a port of the Super Nintendo game. It's not. But I feel like it's good that I feel like the levels were way too long for a portable game. Like Yoshi's Island on Super Nintendo, those levels are long. And this is a good return of form, because Yoshi's Island, the second game became Yoshi's Story, and Yoshi's Story and Yoshi's Island kind of became branching paths, where Yoshi's Island's a bit more cutesy, a little easier, whereas Yoshi's Island is traditionally a bit more challenging, such as it were, a bit more of a traditional Yoshi game, more like Yoshi's Island. I played about a third through this, about a quarter through this. I lost interest, ended up selling it. I feel like all the different, we don't have just Baby Mario, you have Baby Donkey Kong, Baby Bowser, Baby Peach, Baby Wario. I feel like it complicated things too much, all these special powers. I was a bit more conservative, wanted something a little more like the Super Nintendo game. I have it on DS though. Final Fantasy III, not a game I purchased or played or was interested in, but this is notable because this is the very first time they remade Final Fantasy III from the Famicom to a polygonal 3D remake. And this is I don't know why I have all these fruit flies around me all of a sudden, but this is the first time since 2000. No, this is the first time that Final Fantasy III was released outside of Japan. So for the first time, the game was available, and much altered form, but it was very much appreciated at the time. Now, Hotel Dusk Room 215, this is kind of the spiritual sequel to Trace Memory. A bit more of a film noir kind of feel, also T-rated like Trace Memory. I never actually played it. This one, I believe, is actually held like a book. Now, Wario Master of Disguise, I love the first Wario on Game Boy. I was interested in this, never actually got it. I do have it on the Wii U Virtual Console, though. Pokemon Diamond, this was, well, several things had happened. Well, my relation with Pokemon, well, on one hand, well, I hadn't even, it wasn't until 2005 that I even got Pokemon Sapphire on Game Boy Advance. So in 2006, this came out, and I honestly, this is the first time that I looked at the newest Pokemon game and was like, I don't know, I feel like the system is capable of much more. And Pokemon Heart Gold Soul Silver, which I'll talk about later, did get my attention. I played those, and I didn't mind it not really. I mean, in terms of the interface, Heart Gold Soul Silver was fantastic. But in terms of graphics, I was more lenient on it because it was a remake of a Game Boy Color game. But in terms of pushing the series forward compared to the potential of the system, Pokemon Diamond was the first time I looked at Pokemon on a progressive system and thought, this isn't really pushing the potential of the system. Pokemon Black and White, on the other hand, was more what was more up my alley, but that didn't come out till after the 3DS was already on the market. So that came out April 20. Now, the DS browser, I was very... Now, this is a world where... This is, 2006? So, yeah, iPhone wasn't until 2007. So in a world before iPhone, before modern smartphones, the idea of being able to have access to a web browser on a handheld device, I mean, this is at a time when it was a big deal that I could go... So I was moving around not an iBook, a MacBook with a Intel Core Duo processor, and just being able to access the web via Wi-Fi on that was a big deal, let alone a handheld device. So it was very slow, clunky. It needed a special RAM cartridge. It was still slow. This is the beginning of Nintendo's love affair with Opera. Yeah, it's just not something that I ever used. I didn't hear good responses for it. It didn't support a lot of websites even at the time, let alone nowadays. But Etrian Odyssey, not a game I was really aware of at the time, but it's one of those games where you're going into roguelike dungeons, as I understand it, and you're making your map with the touchscreen and mapping out the dungeons as you go to complete your map. And like many RPGs, making great use of the dual screens and the touchscreen. Now, Biker Mice from Mars, I'm just I found out about this game by accident as I was preparing to do this feature. Really, I was just astounded that a Biker Mice from Mars game was made on the Nintendo DS in 2006. If you don't know, Biker Mice from Mars was one of those mid-90s Ninja Turtles wannabes that was kind of just came and went. So, yeah, the fact that it came out on... there was a game about them on the DS was kind of bizarre. Now, Picross DS... This is something I think my mom was really into. I never played it myself. I tried Mario's Picross at Funkoland. I popped in Mario's Picross, tried it. I didn't like it because it was very similar to these horrible number puzzles that my third grade teacher, and it's not her fault. She didn't mean for this to. If I was able to speak up for myself like I could at the time now, I had a lot of several documented disabilities in relation to doing math, functioning in math in a normal sense, and also with my handwriting. And there were these number puzzles that were coloring. So it's like coloring and math in the same thing. And then I had to finish it, or else I'd be sent to detention for not finishing my math work. And this is not something I just made up after like, oh, I have such and such. I was diagnosed at a university hospital. I was receiving services at the school. They were aware I had these issues. But so on one hand, I'm receiving occupational therapy and special education accommodation. On the other hand, I'm getting sent to detention. Spent like 3 out of like 3 out of every 5 days in detention during recess because I could not finish these stupid number coloring puzzles that were similar to Picross. So on one hand, they're treating it as though I'm just misbehaving and goofing off, and I'm putting all my attention and focus into this, trying not to get in trouble, because then it's like I'd get letters sent home, oh, your son is not doing their homework, and then I have to have my parents sign it, and then I get in trouble, and yay, disability stuff. But Brain Age 2, my mom had this, I never even played it. Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass. When they announced Phantom Hourglass, I think it was Game Developer Conference 2006, they announced that, and it was really fantastic use. I did not like this game. I think in a lot of ways there's certain production elements of like the music and certain things that are really even behind Link's Awakening on the 8-bit Game Boy. But in terms of being a fantastic DS game, great use of the stylus, a fully stylus controlled Zelda game, which a lot of people had to be sold on. Like, oh, is this going to be a casualized, Zelda game for Wii Sports Grandma? No, it was a full-fledged Zelda adventure, lacking in some aspects, but great use of the dual screens, great use of the touchscreen. It was really a fantastic case use for the DS, using the touchscreen to do your maps as you're exploring. I ended up losing interest in it. I did not beat it, but I never denied this is fantastic use of the Nintendo, every aspect of DS and how it can transform a familiar game concept like top-down Zelda. Now I do have that on the Wii Virtual Console. I'll play it someday. Flash Focus. This is kind of like Brain Age, but for Vision. I never actually got this game. I just thought it was worth mentioning. Now Mario Party DS. I was very interested in this until I found out that there was no online multiplayer through Nintendo Wi-Fi connection as there was for Mario Kart DS. And of course, I get pushback from Nintendo fanboys, sycophants, whatever you want to call them, saying, oh, well, of course there's no online. Online is like against the spirit of Mario Party. It would break the hearts of Nintendo fans everywhere. Mario Party is supposed to be played local multiplayer. And I'm like, okay, well, that's what you were saying about Mario Kart back when Iwata was saying that Mario Kart DS would be local Wi-Fi only, but when it was online Wi-Fi, then you were okay with it. So, and that's the same line a lot of the Nintendo online yes men sycophants would say about Mario Party, up until finally they made the first Mario Party with a full-fledged online was, Super Mario Party on the Switch, but that was added years after the fact. The first Mario Party game to launch with a proper full-fledged online was Mario Party Superstars on the Switch, and it worked great. Even as bad as Nintendo's online services are known to be, it worked great, but as soon as I found out there was no online multiplayer, I lost interest in this, never played it. Now, the Korg DS10 synthesizers, a lot of audio, like music people, and this is around the time when the chiptune scene started coming out, where you'd actually have, music concerts, people are dancing, and there's a DJ set up with multiple Game Boys composing live chiptune music on their game, on the original Game Boy, using custom hardware. And so we have this Korg DS10 synthesizer, where you have basically a Korg synthesizer on your DS that people, like the music makers, they were really into this. Now, apparently, this will do anything you tell it to. You could use the DS10 synthesizer, apparently, to do things to the DS that will blow out and permanently damage its speakers. So, yeah, there's warning out there, be careful with this. If you have a DS with a capture device installed or something like that can't be replaced easily, do not use it on those systems. It could potentially destroy your DS's speakers if you don't know what you're doing. But very robust. There was a sequel to this a couple years down the line. And I think this game goes for upwards of $100 now. Very sought after by people in the music creativity scene. Master of Illusion. I only included this game because I never found out about it until I was compiling this list. Master of Illusion was a game that was a tutorial. There's a Nintendo published game that was how to do different magic tricks, sleight of hand, card tricks, and things like that. And it's very interesting because Master of Illusion was also the subtitle of the 13th Pokemon movie, which was Zoroark Master of Illusions. So I didn't no idea this existed. Now, Mystery Dungeon Shiren the Wanderer. This was put out by Sega. And this was, I think, an attempt to, after Pokemon Mystery Dungeon was a really big hit on DS, Nintendo tried to Sega tried to. This is a remake of a Super Famicom game, I believe, and they tried to these roguelike mystery dungeon games are really popular on DS. Let's come out with this one, but it was really clear that this one was the success of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon was based on the Pokemon franchise, and not just roguelike gameplay in general. But yeah, getting back to Pokemon Mystery Dungeon a bit, the idea of being a sapient Pokemon living in a village in a world of talking Pokemon was cool, but I was not into the battle system that much, unfortunately. Now, personal trainer math. As I was going through a lot of struggles with math, and even in college, where it was I had documented paperwork saying I could not function in a typical math class environment. But I was still being thrown into these classes that I had to pay for, that were impossible for me to pass, and it delayed my college career by many years. And it got to the point where I was nearly had to sue the school, and the college was treating it as though, oh, you just have to study harder. I'm like, no, I'm putting my all into this. I'm seeing a psychiatrist because I'm so this is messing with me so bad, and so I was trying anything. I used personal trainer math here, part of the Touch Generation series. This was based on a certain mathematician, Mr. Kageyama in Japan, who developed a method for developing addition, multiplication, subtraction, and division skills, basic arithmetic, using this 100 cell method. So I was using this to try to get better at my arithmetic, and then I'm like, okay, now great, now I have to do these finite mathematics things in college, and this isn't helping me pass. So I really was trying anything I could to get better at math, but it wasn't a matter of me studying. And to wind up that story, I ended up doing. Meanwhile, for all these years this was happening, the actual head of the math department had no idea this was happening. They ended up having me do an independent study with the head of the math department, and the head of the math department said, the things we're doing together in this independent study are more advanced than what I'd be doing with an actual math major. How have they been telling you for almost a decade that you're mathematically illiterate? He was like you're clearly not. You're doing more advanced stuff, but it's just the way a typical maths classroom is, a typical math class is structured for a neurotypical student. It just not work with me. But anyway, personal trainer cooking. My mom has this. Now, this is kind of easy to laugh at. You have to remember, this is smartphone, even in the first couple of years of the iPhone being on the market, the idea of having apps, you could download unique programs that might teach you how to cook. The idea of having YouTube, there's still things that were developing on smartphones. So the idea of having a cooking program as a $20 standalone DS game was not that outlandish, and it's something my mom used a couple of times. And I never cooked with this, but I did borrow it from my mom and just to see what it was like. This is another one of those games that even after Brain Age and Nintendogs became hits in North America, I really did not think that Nintendo would ever actually bring this out in North America. But they did. There was also America's Test Kitchen Let's Get Cooking, which came out a while later. So yeah, these cooking games actually did have a following, and they take you step by step. I know there are photos, I know there are videos, but the cool thing is once you decide to do a recipe, it would make the shopping list for you, so that when you go to the shopping mall, you get your the supermarket, you get your DS out and actually click through the items you need for that recipe as you go through them. And I think both of these games, yeah, these were both published by Nintendo. And Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky, I really do regret the concept of the world of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is right up my alley, yet the actual gameplay never spoke to me, so I didn't bother getting this one. But I will play this someday, because I heard this has some of the best storytelling in the Pokemon franchise, like an actual story with plot, plot development, plot twists, meaningful developments. So yeah, I will be playing that. I do have that on the Wii U Virtual Console. Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks. To imagine, they made a Legend of Zelda game about trains and steam engines, and I was not into it. When they first announced it, I was really excited, but I'm like, oh, it's just the Phantom Hourglass style again. Not that I appreciate that for what it was, but really what turned me off this time was I was always interested in the idea of a Hyrule and early industrialization. What does an 1820s Hyrule look like? A low-key steampunk kind of Hyrule. The first factories are being built, maybe running off of water wheels, early steam engines, like maybe I'll get a primitive traction engine Link uses instead of a horse. But the direction they took when it was time for a Legend of Zelda game themed around trains was they took more of a Thomas and the Magic Railroad sort of angle, where there are these magical trains and magical tracks that come from the spirit world. And I'm like, this is more like Thomas and the Magic Railroad than, a realistic Hyrule and early industrialization. So I was not interested. But I do have this on the Wii U Virtual Console. I will play it someday. Pokemon Soul Silver with the Pokewalker. I mean, there was a period, if you were attending college at the time this game came out, you saw Pokewalkers everywhere. And even out on the street, you'd see people with Pokewalkers like, hey, let's zap. And, it was really cool. Now, one thing I hated about the Pokewalker is that if a Pokemon gained a level while on the Pokewalker, they would miss out losing a move that they would have learned at that level. So I ended up with a Quilava that did not have Ember. And I'm like, oh, come on. That, like, my Pokemon, you're punishing me for using your device. Now, what I was hoping is that with the Nintendo 3DS, with its built-in apps, you would have something like the Pokewalker as an app, a downloadable app from the eShop on the system. They never really went in that direction, unfortunately. But yeah, fantastic game. There's, I remember visiting loved ones in the hospital a lot. It was a difficult time, lots of hospital visits, and I really did escape into the Pokemon world as a form of escape, and really imagining the Pokemon world out in the real world, which kind of gave me ideas akin to Pokemon Go, but I'm like, yeah, Nintendo would never do something like that. They ended up doing it anyway. I'm glad they did. But fortunately, my loved one did come out of the hospital during this time period, and I was playing this a lot. But I remember lots of trips to the hospital, lots of spending every minute that I could get away with during visiting hours in the hospital playing this, was spending time with them. Now, this is a game I never played, but it always interested me, just the name alone. 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors, 999. This is a sort of thriller game on DS, an M-rated DS game. There weren't very many of those. Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars was another M-rated DS game. Kind of a escape room type of thriller. And before the concept of an escape rooms really sort of entered the popular consciousness, it's a very interesting game. I never actually played it, but 100 classic books. Now, this is something my mom had. Look at her with her DSi XL. Now, the DSi XL really thriving and being marketed towards that older, middle-aged and seniors market. A larger system, very well suited to being held like a book. At a time before, the idea of ebooks on smartphones is still like there's the idea of the Kindle, a dedicated e-reader, but you have millions of these older gamers, not super casual gamers who have DSIs, DS Lites, and DSi XLs, and it's like, hey, 100 classic books, just 100 public domain books Nintendo arranged and put on there with the help of HarperCollins. And this product does not require age classification, and some of those books have some kid-friendly books, but a lot of those books are not really. If they had to rate it based on the content of the books, it would have been an M-rated game potentially. Now, Kingdom Hearts Recoded, I never played it, but it did stick out to me at the time as a game that really was more ambitious with the polygonal 3D environments more so than many DS games were. Now, Pokemon Black, this was the game that really got me back in love. Well, Pokemon Soul Silver, but Pokemon Black was the beginning of me really playing new Pokemon games, like around the time they came out, because I still lived in the New York City metropolitan area, so a game based on New York City and Eastern New Jersey was a really great thing. A lot of people really just think the New York City parallels are limited to Castelia City, which is clearly based on downtown Lower Manhattan, but the entire region is based on the farms in East New Jersey, the industrial complexes and the shipping areas in East New Jersey. the art district, Dumbo, that district with all those art galleries, with the cobblestone streets with the disused train tracks, right next to the Camden Plaza and Brooklyn Bridge Park, which were in the game were Pinwheel Forest. And then you have the Skyar Bridge in the form of parallel on the Brooklyn Bridge. The parallels were a lot deeper than most people realize. Game Freak did a lot of great research and really being inspired by different aspects of the New York City metropolitan area in this game. So, and even back in the 90s, I'd imagine walking through Times Square, imagine what this city would be like in the Pokemon world. So to really see that validated in the form of an actual game was fantastic. Pokemon Black 2, one of the last DS games I got. This is in 2012, well into the DS lifespan. Even the first Pokemon Black was controversial, saying oh, this should have been a 3DS game. Pokemon Black 2, people were outright pissed that this was not a 3DS game. Now, there were certain features you could unlock by playing it on 3DS, but it's okay, this game was either you're going to... I don't want to... putting this obvious DS game, this game exists because it's based on the world of the DS game. It's like Breath of the Wild 2. I mean, excuse me, I could just call it Breath of the Wild 2. It's like this game was kind of Tears of the Kingdom to Breath of the Wild. And it's very clear that this is made for this specific system, with 3DS being so much more capable than the DS. To have a DS game just slapped on 3DS with probably bad 3D slapped onto it. And even, this is the same thing that happened with Nintendo Switch, where people, there are articles oh, Pokemon Company, they're going crazy. They're not going to make Pokemon games for 3DS. Of course they would. Just wait till 2013. They're going to come out with Pokemon X and Y and for 3DS from the ground up. And then the same thing happened with 3DS to Nintendo Switch, where it's oh, they're doing Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon instead of making 3DS Pokemon games. Game Freak refuses to make Pokemon games for Switch. What's Nintendo going to do? And of course, you just wait. They're going to make the Pokemon game for the Switch from the ground up, and it's going to barely run. Well, actually, no, Pokemon Sword and Shield was just unimpressive. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, those were just barely functional. Then we have, I think this is the last game I bought at the time, Retro Game Challenge. I actually have this open on my DS right here, right now. So this is a game where you play as two children in 1980s Japan, and on your lower screen you have the living room with the two kids, and the upper screen you have your television, and you play a fictional game system of the 80s, clearly based on the Famicom, and play fictional games based off of Famicom and arcade games of the time, and the cool thing is you actually get magazines unlock more of these mini games as the game goes on. And you get magazines that cover games that you get later on within the game. And so it's you're reading game magazines to get tips on games. So there's certain challenges to get more. You have to get a certain number of points, or you have to get to a certain level. And you have to do those things, and you use the tips you see in the game magazines within the game to do it. So it's based on a Japanese television show, from what I understand. This game goes from the 80 to 100 plus... which I did not only found out in the course of trying to get the box art to put on there. Now, this is a game that apparently Xseed really did take a risk by bringing this out to the North American market, and a lot of people just pirated it. Piracy was a rampant problem on DS, and sadly, the sequel never did come out in North America. And here was missed. I never even knew this. I just stumbled into this game. Now, DS, there's also a 3DS version. I haven't looked in the 3DS version, but DS Myst seems like one of those games that would be perfect for the DS. The touch screen for a point-and-click adventure game, the dual screens, but apparently this version's very bad. I don't know if the 3DS version's any better. So, that is... I list many games I don't have, but it was a total of 24 games that I actually owned. Most of those I still have. A couple of them I did sell at the time for a little pocket change to get more new games. But that is basically my experience with the DS. Now, with Pokemon Black and White, what I will say is I did get my DSi XL. I already had 3DS. I got the DSi XL for Pokemon Black and White because I'm hey, it's a Pokemon game based on my own region of New York City. I want to play this in the most grandiose manner possible with these big, beautiful screens. And so it was kind of an event. It's like getting up, people back in the 90s, you hear about people renting a big screen TV to watch the Super Bowl. And that's what Pokemon Black and White was for me when I got my DSi XL. And yeah, I never had a DSi I got went straight to the DSi XL. My DS Lite, I have not touched it in years. It's actually still in storage at where I in my storage unit in several states away where I used to live. But yeah, so that's my history of my experience with the Nintendo DS. It was a fantastic system. It's a system that it's very difficult. You could emulate it. Yeah, there are emulators around, but to have the physical system in your hands, to hold the stylus in your hands. Now, one thing I do want to mention, as the years went on, people got more used to how capacitive touchscreens worked on mobile devices, like tablets and smartphones. There was this negative word of mouth I'd hear that, oh, the DS, it's a good system, but the touchscreen isn't any good. Or people even talking back on, and we're going to have the 20th anniversary of DS, which is why I'm making this for, even though it's like only not, the 20th anniversary of the announcement's only a few months away. You're going to have people looking back on DS, and I hear people even now talking about like, oh, DS was a good system. The touchscreen was really bad, though. It wasn't very responsive. But that's not true. You look back at the time, no one talked about the touchscreen being unresponsive. Resistive touchscreens are meant to be either large touchscreen buttons that you hit with your thumb, or using a stylus for precision. It is meant to be mainly used either large touchscreen buttons or with a stylus. Trying to relate to the touchscreen on the DS as though it were a smartphone or tablet touchscreen is the wrong way to do it, and it's not fair to call the DS's touchscreen unresponsive based on that. So getting back on a Pokemon a little bit. With Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, I never played, but with Pokemon Heart Gold, Soul Silver, with Pokemon Black and White, Black 2, White 2, fantastic use of the touchscreen for the interface of these games. A lot of the best games to make use of the dual screens were RPGs and strategy games, but any game, the games that made the best use of the dual screens and touchscreens really didn't pop out at you like, whoa, you're playing with two screens. Whoa, you're playing with a touchscreen. You could argue WarioWare Touched was like that a little bit. Not in my opinion. But a lot of the best uses of the dual screens, a lot of the best uses of the touchscreen were things that were so intuitive, so well integrated into the game that it really didn't stick out. Where a lot of the times you forgot you were using two screens. You forgot you were using a touchscreen. It was just such an integral part of the experience. So that is the history of the Nintendo DS and my personal experience with that history, experiencing DS from the lead up to its announcement to the lead up to its release, and then actually experiencing it as an on-the-market current system. I can't believe 20 years have already passed, but the time moves on, and we've now, there's so many things of the DS, like the wireless multiplayer, the ability to have touchscreen gameplay is still with us today on all modern smartphones and tablets, and even on Nintendo Switch, though there's a lot less emphasis on touchscreen because of the fact that you do have that single screen experience where you have to be able to play a lot of games equally well on the television as well as when you're playing it as a handheld or tablet or like on the tabletop mode. So Nintendo DS, there is nothing like it. It wasn't ahead of its time. It was precisely of its time. Nintendo tapped into that exact moment before the smart device revolution, where they really could get to really innovate things for the core players of traditional games and bring in a lot of people who were in the market for games, but not in the market for the games that were being marketed as, to the hardcore gamers. So that's it for now. If you want to see me play retro games, I do like to give the context and history of a lot of the games I play. I will be playing New Super Mario Brothers on Nintendo DS using the Wii U Virtual Console and other DS games in the future, but I did want to get this history lesson on the DS out before I started covering DS stuff, because I want to play New Super Mario Brothers on DS in preparation for playing Super Mario Brothers Wonder next month on the Nintendo Switch. So join me on Twitch for that. I hope you will. And so that'll be it for now, and thank you very much for watching.